Chapter 1002. But then, the mysterious man spoke in a tone that sounded like he was teaching him patiently, "As a saint venerable, don't you know, if you don't even have the guts to listen to what I have to say today, it's equivalent to losing the right to fight me head-on. Then, after today, no matter what the outcome of today's battle is, your cultivation will never advance an inch." Jun Moxie's hands were still behind his back, but after he finished speaking he suddenly took a step forward, his right foot stomping on the ground with great force. The entire land suddenly trembled violently in the midst of endless oppressiveness. And Jun Moxie's eyes suddenly turned from gentle to as sharp as a knife. He said word by word, "And the words that I haven't finished saying today will become your heart demon forever." That sudden violent shaking of the ground was like a bolt of lightning that struck Zhang Xiao's heart. A jolt after that gaze. It was as if after the lightning, a thunderbolt followed. That last sentence, word by word, was like a heavy hammer, hammering heavily into Zhang Xiao's heart. Zhang Xiao suddenly felt as if his mind had exploded. His heart shook violently. Heart demon. From today onwards, I will never be able to advance an inch. The words that I haven't finished saying will become my heart demon forever. Zhang Xiao's eyes were ferocious, but beads of sweat the size of soybeans were already dripping down his forehead. He could still barely control the cold sweat earlier. Even if he was shaken in his heart, he would definitely not show it on his face. But right now, he finally couldn't control it. The other party's words were like the sharpest blade, stabbing into his heart again and again. There was no way he could not be bothered. Zhang Xiao's aura instantly weakened by 30%. This wasn't because Zhang Xiao was useless. As a saint venerable expert, he could be said to have seen many things and seen all sorts of big scenes. But the other party had a wondrous skill that he had never deeply understood: psychology. Jun Moxie's every word and action, every sigh, and every gaze, all struck Zhang Xiao's heart. As long as Zhang Xiao showed the slightest bit of hesitation, the slightest bit of doubt, Jun Moxie would immediately take advantage of it. It was an all-out attack. Every slight movement, every careless glance, was able to strike at Zhang Xiao's weakness. If Zhang Xiao didn't fall for it, then he must also be a transmigrator. Or perhaps he could have taken the initiative to attack from the start, and not given young Master Jun the opportunity to speak. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to withstand this kind of pressure. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiao was not a transmigrator. He didn't have the guts to launch an attack the moment they met. Although Jun Moxie had advanced rapidly and had many fortuitous encounters, his true strength was only at the peak of the 3rd-level Holy Emperor. Compared to Zhang Xiao, this 1st-level peak Saint Venerable, he was still lacking the 4th-level Holy Emperor. Holy Emperor primary level, middle level, high level, peak, breakthrough to Saint Venerable, stabilized Saint Venerable, 1st-level Saint Venerable primary level, middle level, high level, peak. There was a difference of 11 levels. An insurmountable gap. Xian Qi could be seen. A difference of 1 level was already enough to seal the victory. There was no room for luck, much less 11 levels. Even if he had the Yin-Yang escape, the Hongjun Pagoda, and the blood of yellow flame. He had the most powerful and invincible cheat in this world. But these could only protect his life from being threatened. It was impossible to kill Zhang Xiao in a face-to-face battle. But Jun Moxie had to kill this bastard today. Every time he fought a battle above his cultivation level, it would be accompanied by a breakthrough opportunity. Jun Moxie felt that he hadn't broken through for a very long time. The reason was that he hadn't fought a battle above his cultivation level for too long. Only in a high-intensity battle filled with life and death could he come into contact with that level of comprehension that he normally couldn't come into contact with. Only then would he have the chance to break through. Furthermore, if Zhang Xiao didn't die, the threat would be too great. Even to Jun Moxie himself, he had an ominous feeling that he was in a precarious situation. Under the assassination of such a Saint Venerable expert, he was truly treading on thin ice. Jun Moxie did not want to let himself suffer this kind of vexation. So Jun Moxie had to use all the methods that he could and could not use to attack Xiao Zhao's confidence. He had to weaken his battle strength to a certain extent before the battle began. Only then would he have a chance. It had to be said that with the Hongjun Pagoda as his backing, Jun Dashao was full of confidence. Before the battle had even begun, he had already forced Zhang Xiaoxiao into a difficult position. In the current situation, if Zhang Xiaoxiao didn't continue listening, even if he wouldn't have developed a heart demon, because of what Jun Moxie had said, he would add a non-existent heart demon to himself. A true tragedy, but if he were to continue listening, then his confidence would be completely shattered by young Master Jun, and this Saint Venerable would probably crumble before they even had the chance to fight head-on. If Zhang Xiaoxiao was a little smarter, a little more confident, it would not be difficult for him to realize this. If the opponent was really that brilliant, he could just directly kill him in this state. What was the point of wasting so much breath? But it was a pity that he was too smart. He saw the opponent's actions as a cat toying with a mouse, toying with the enemy in a situation where victory was certain. This kind of thinking scared Zhang Xiaoxiao so much that he didn't dare to make a move. I want to hear how I am not qualified. Heart demon, your ass. Speak. I'll definitely let you speak until you're satisfied. Zhang Xiaoxiao nearly vomited blood. Facing this mysterious person in front of him, it was as if he was facing a monster. This damned guy, with an unfathomable face, firmly grasped his weakness, causing him, who originally had the intention to retreat, to be at a loss whether to leave or not. If he were to fall into such a passive situation in a head-on battle, it would naturally be because the opponent was more skilled and he was not as skilled as the opponent. If he lost, he would have nothing to say. But right now, with just a few words, he had made him into such a pathetic state. If he were to lose like this today, then even if he could escape unscathed today, it would also be extremely aggrieved. Even if it wasn't a heart demon like that person said, there was definitely a shadow. You're wrong. It's not that I want to tell you, but you urgently need to listen to me. Jun Moxie looked at him arrogantly. So, whether I say it or not is of great significance to you. Even if I don't say it, you'll probably still beg me to say it. Because if I don't say it, you'll continue to be paranoid for the rest of your life. What do you want? What other tricks do you want? Zhang Xiaoxiao finally couldn't take it anymore. Are you going to say it or not? Those two reasons of yours, how long are you going to keep it to yourself before revealing the truth? He originally didn't want to listen, but now he had no choice but to listen. And it wasn't because he wanted to listen, but because he was forced to listen. But now, the other party was playing tricks on him. Zhang Xiaoxiao nearly vomited blood. Zhang Xiaoxiao completely didn't realize that as the conversation continued, both sides had fallen into an extremely strange situation. The originally extreme opposing sides had now reached an indescribable equilibrium. Jun Moxie scoffed coldly and said lightly, I'll say it if I want to say it, and I won't say it if I don't want to. If I want you to listen, you can't refuse to listen. If I don't want to tell you, it's useless even if you beg me. Now that you're so anxious for me to teach you, I won't say it. Do you think you have any right to want me to say it? You're not my son. You hand over your life. Zhang Xiaoxiao's anger was unquenchable. He leaped up and attacked with all his might. Too furious. Too aggrieved. Too helpless. Too motherfucker. He finally realized that the other party was just toying with him. From the start to the end, the other party had never shown him any sincerity. Right now, he clearly realized that he had completely lost in the battle of aura. In other words, if he were to fight with the other party now, his battle strength would be weakened by at least 40% or even more. But Zhang Xiaoxiao had no choice but to fight, because right now he was so furious that he was about to explode. If this confrontation dragged on any longer, Zhang Xiaoxiao felt that he would be angered to the point of losing all reason. If that situation really happened, then this place would be the place where he would die today. There would be no room for negotiation. He had already lost his aura. If his mind was taken away, then Zhang Xiaoxiao didn't dare to imagine the consequences of that. Even if it was just a thought, it would be an unimaginable negative impact. So he mustered all his remaining courage and attacked. But the moment Zhang Xiaoxiao leaped up, he saw the black-robed man waving his sleeves lightly and saying lightly, "Go back." With a loud bang, a huge ball of flames suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Everything within a radius of 400 to 500 zhang instantly turned into a world of fire. The flames instantly rose up, reaching a height of several zhang. Half the sky seemed to be dyed red. Xiao Xiao was shocked. He had his own plans in mind when he attacked this time. Previously, this mysterious man had been using words to confuse him, but he hadn't really attacked. And in the chase earlier, he had clearly determined that this person's strength was only equivalent to the 4th level of the Holy Emperor, or the early stages of the Holy Emperor. It was just that his movement techniques were exceptionally good. With this judgment, and the fact that he hadn't made a move at all, only using words to confuse him, Zhang Xiaoxiao decided to give it his all. Other than preventing himself from being weakened further, there was also the possibility of winning by taking a risk. If it was really as he had judged, that this mysterious man was only a paper tiger, then not only would he be able to obtain victory, he would also be able to get rid of his inner demons. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But as he attacked, the mysterious man's response caused Zhang Xiaoxiao's heart to sink once again. When one's Xian cultivation reached an extreme level, one could control the power of heaven and earth to a certain extent. As a saint venerable, he was naturally clear about this. And he was also considered an expert in this field. But he had never heard of anyone being able to create fire out of thin air. This flame was most likely not easy to block. The opponent's strength was unfathomable. If it was an ordinary flame, why would he take it out to embarrass himself? As this thought flashed through Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind, his body immediately somersaulted, leaving behind a series of afterimages in the air as he flew back. But as he retreated, a bright pillar of water suddenly rushed out of the flames like an azure dragon, fiercely attacking his face. Chapter 1003. Zhang Xiaoxiao's eyes flashed in shock. He completely didn't expect that since there was already a huge fire burning him, why would he suddenly spit out water again? Caught off guard, he flung his sleeves forcefully, hitting the air. Making use of the recoil, his body changed directions again in midair, dodging 70 feet away. He leapt up in one breath, but before he could launch an attack, he was forced back by the sudden appearance of the flames. Then he was ambushed by the water dragon. Right now, his body had already changed directions 3 times in midair, and he still hadn't landed on the ground. The water dragon that extended out from the fire suddenly exploded, and once again abruptly dissipated in the raging fire. Along with the sizzling sound, clouds of thick white fog rose up, and the vast wilderness was suddenly shrouded in a thick fog. The originally powerful stream of water had actually turned into water mist at this moment. Suddenly, the originally pitch-black night became even darker, and one couldn't even see their own fingers if they stretched out their hands. As the thick fog filled the surroundings, there was suddenly an unusually sharp howl of ghosts crying. The next moment, there seemed to be countless ghostly eyes surrounding him from all directions. Zhang Xiaoxiao was shocked. The other party actually had such an unfathomable method. Right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao was already certain that this person was the mysterious person who had snuck into the Zhan family's underground world. Because he had heard Zhan Tu and Zhan Yishao mention that this person had this kind of mysterious method of arson. And the 10,000 ghosts soul-devourer insects that the old ancestor had painstakingly cultivated were destroyed by this mysterious person's strange flames. The old ancestor's 10,000 ghosts soul-devourer insects were already confirmed to be treasured insects that did not fear any water or fire. But they were still unable to defend against the mysterious flames that the other party had unleashed. This was also the main reason why Zhang Xiaoxiao didn't dare to charge into the sea of flames with just his protective Xian Qi. The other party could come and go as he pleased in the Zhan family's underground world. Zhan Yishao and Zhan Tu had joined forces, but they couldn't even touch his shadow, much less do anything to him. And even under such high security, he could easily kill Zhan Tianji and destroy the entire Tianji secret chamber. And leave confidently. What kind of strength was this? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaoxiao felt even more fearful. Putting himself in their shoes, if it were him, he would never be able to do such a thing. The moment this thought arose, Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind was thrown into chaos again. His fear of battle increased greatly, and the thought of escaping also grew. Zhang Xiaoxiao, who was inexplicably terrified in his heart, suddenly realized that he was in mid-air and was surrounded by danger. With a muffled grunt of shock and anger, he forcefully circulated his Xian Qi and activated the 1,000 Cati drop, plummeting towards the ground. Under such circumstances, forcefully circulating his Xian Qi and executing the 1,000 Cati drop was equivalent to automatically reversing the flow of Xian Qi. Even a Saint Venerable expert would suffer a great deal of damage to their vitality. Especially someone like Zhang Xiaoxiao, who had circulated his Xian Qi several times and was on the verge of drying up. But right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao had no choice but to do so. With his rich battle experience, he knew that if the opponent made use of his current situation to attack, he would definitely fall into an extremely dangerous predicament. Therefore, even if he had to risk suffering from internal injuries, he had to stand firmly on the ground and stabilize his footing. The only way was to protect himself before making any further plans. Zhang Xiaoxiao's body fell from the sky like a meteorite. In the entire process, he did not encounter the slightest attack. This sort of situation was completely out of Zhang Xiaoxiao's expectations. He had already made up his mind that he would rather risk getting injured and come into contact with the ground first. Following that, something even more unexpected happened. With a pu sound, Zhang Xiaoxiao's entire body sunk deep into the ground. Originally, when he landed, he only needed to wait for his feet to touch the ground and borrow the counterforce from the ground. Then, he would be able to change his momentum and float up. Then, he would be able to stand firmly on the ground and wait for the right opportunity to move. But what Zhang Xiaoxiao did not expect was that this time, he felt as if he had fallen into the air of a bottomless cliff. He floated for a long time and did not feel his feet touching the ground. Since he did not come into contact with the ground, how could he talk about borrowing force? I didn't jump so high just now, right? For the sake of attacking, I only jumped 7 to 8 zhang high just now. I should have landed long ago. But right now, based on my senses, I've already descended at least 100 zhang. Why haven't my feet touched the ground yet? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind was in a complete mess. Even if he was a Saint Venerable, he was still a human. In a situation where he was completely unprepared, falling from a height of over 100 zhang, even with his profound Xian Qi protecting his body, he would still suffer heavy injuries. Zhang Xiaoxiao roared and gathered his Xian Qi again. Using the Xian Qi in his body to control the direction of his body's descent, he floated up and was about to turn around and rush back up. But all of a sudden, rumble rumble, a series of earth-shattering noises suddenly rang out. Countless amounts of soil mixed with rocks, tree roots, and muddy water poured down from above like a hot knife through butter. Zhang Xiaoxiao came into contact with it. That cold and heavy feeling from above had already made him understand that this was definitely a real object and not an illusion. This place was actually a trap that the enemy had set up long ago. Just looking at the depth of this trap and the level of security that it had been set up, it would have taken at least 10 days to half a month. But there were still many unexplainable questions. How did the enemy know about his movements in advance? Their movements had clearly only been decided this afternoon. And their landing point was clearly random as well. How did they land so coincidentally into a trap? This was simply too inconceivable. Zhang Xiaoxiao grunted with boundless bewilderment as he was smashed into the deep abyss by countless rocks and soil. When he was smashed down, Zhang Xiaoxiao discovered to his horror that the water mixed with the rocks and soil had actually turned from cool to icy cold. This meant that, as he continued to fall, the water actually became colder and colder. Finally, it formed a thick layer of ice, sealing Zhang Xiaoxiao within it, and it was still falling. As the ice became thicker and thicker, its volume naturally became larger and larger. Zhang Xiaoxiao's entire body was sealed in ice. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. But there was nothing he could do. Even if he really wanted to vomit blood, he couldn't, because his entire body was sealed in ice, including his mouth. He did not land on the ground at all, nor was he able to borrow any external force. In addition to being sealed in ice, he was completely unable to breathe. That breath of true qi that he had already completely dissipated under these repeated blows. Even if the earth-penetrating hand Zhan Xiao was a saint venerable expert and really had the ability to pierce through the heavens and earth, in this situation, he could only wait until this block of ice landed on the ground and shatter the ice seal. Only then would he be able to breathe. And the thing that truly made him depressed was that, even though every place was clearly frozen, there was still no foothold for him to land on. He was still floating in the air. It's fine even if there's a block of ice under my feet. Instead, my upper body had turned into a huge block of ice that was several zhang wide, pressing down on him faster and faster. Zhan Xiao really wanted to scream in horror. Just what the fuck is going on here? But right now, he couldn't even open his mouth. He was completely sealed in ice. And at this moment, Jun Moxie was in the fog above. His hands were waving, and bamboo poles shot out from his hands, forming a dense layer around him. Every bamboo pole was placed in an extremely ingenious position, either straight or slanted, filled with an indescribably strange charm. At the same time, his left foot shone with a dim yellow light, and his right foot shone with a deep blue light, and the valleys and mountains on both sides were like a river that had suddenly been thawed in the depths of winter, suddenly forming an abnormally powerful mudslide. With the momentum of 10,000 horses galloping, the mudslides surged forward, pouring into that huge pit that had suddenly appeared on the ground. Although the momentum of the mudslide was great, it did not affect the bamboo poles that were stuck in the ground in the slightest. This was another strange thing. It seemed to have already exceeded the most basic laws of nature. Finally, Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief and stabbed the last bamboo pole into that huge pit. Instantly, the heavens and earth shook, as if the winds and clouds of the 9 continents had completely gathered at this moment. Boundless dark clouds instantly gathered above his head, so dense that not even wind could pass through. Jun Moxie clapped his hands together, and with a crisp pa sound, the entire mountain valley actually disappeared with this crisp sound, leaving behind only a boundless thick fog. Even the continuous sounds that sounded like mountains collapsing and the earth splitting had disappeared. In the silent night, not a sound could be heard. In the surroundings, only a few birds flew up from the trees far away, looking in this direction with their round eyes, flapping their wings in confusion and flying away, to think that even sound could be isolated. The formation was complete. The mysterious sky disorienting formation. And the Jiushao Huanpei lightning attracting formation. Jun Moxie was completely confident that even if Zhan Xiao was a saint venerable expert, under these 2 interlocking formations, he would at least lose 2 layers of skin. The clouds in the sky had clearly begun to brew something. Streaks of lightning flickered in the thick and dense layers of clouds. From the heavens to the earth, there was a tense atmosphere, as if a storm was brewing. Jun Moxie could finally heave a sigh of relief. He had completed all the movements, and was now gasping for air. All these arrangements were precisely the reason why he had chosen this place as the battlefield. The mountains on both sides were just right for him to use the power of earth. And this place was located in a valley. The terrain was extremely low, but the water level was relatively high. With a little guidance, he could use the power of water. And there was a lack of trees in the surroundings, so it was rather dry. Using the power of fire was not difficult at all. The last advantage was that the ground was extremely flat. It was the best choice for setting up formations. Chapter 1004. First, he wiped away Zhan Xiao's confidence layer by layer, then angered him with words, leaving him with no choice but to make a move before he was fully prepared. Then, he took advantage of the moment when he was feeling apprehensive to suddenly sprinkle fire to put up a false show of strength, forcing him off the ground and into the air. Then, he used the water dragon to force him back, releasing his Xian Qi. The power of water immediately turned into mist, enveloping the entire space, and temporarily causing Zhan Xiao's eyes to lose their effect. The final trump card, the power of earth, suddenly exploded, causing Zhan Xiao to sink deep into the ground. And he made use of this time to quickly set up a large formation, preparing to beat the enemy when he was down. The mysterious sky disorientating formation, as the name suggested, was naturally a mysterious formation that focused on confusion. It was enough to cause the enemy who fell into this formation to be completely unable to differentiate north, south, east, and west. And no matter how they walked, they would not be able to walk out. Going around and around was just going around in circles within the formation. To put it in simpler terms, everything that the person in the formation saw was an illusion. It could be said to be a formation that used camouflage as its foundation. Although this formation was only an illusion formation, it was a mysterious formation that came from the Hongjun Pagoda. How could it be ordinary? The difference between this formation and ordinary formations was that it did not rely on geography to set up the formation. Instead, it had to use the heaven and earth yuan qi to fill the formation and maintain its operation. The greatest advantage of this formation was that as long as the person who set up the formation had enough ability, the formation could use the heaven and earth yuan qi as a source of energy and continue to operate. But Jun Moxi's achievements were still very limited. With his current level of attainment, this formation could only last for 3 days and 3 nights at most. If Da Xiao's abilities were sufficient, just this formation alone would be enough to trap Zhang Xiaoxiao to death. Of course, this formation was still sufficient to deal with Zhang Xiaoxiao. But if it was used to deal with someone of a higher level, it would be beyond its capabilities. Because the higher one's Xian Qi cultivation, the more freely one could use the heaven and earth yuan qi. If someone could use more heaven and earth yuan qi than this formation, then it would be tragic. Because this formation would not have any effect on him. For example, if this array was used to deal with 9 serenities and 14 masters, with Jun Moxi's current attainments, 9 serenities and 14 masters would probably be able to rush out with a single jump. This was a comparison between relative and absolute. Although Zhang Xiaoxiao's strength was higher than Jun Daxiao's, it was not enough to go against the formation. Thus, he was trapped in the formation and had no choice but to sit here for these 3 days. But Daxiao's cultivation was still too shallow, and he could only trap the enemy for 3 days. And the ultimate goal of this battle was to annihilate the enemy. After Jun Moxi finished setting up the mysterious sky bewildering tracks, he confirmed that Zhang Xiaoxiao would not be able to escape. Then he immediately set up another 9 heavens lightning attraction formation, and connected the eye of the formation with the mysterious sky bewildering tracks formation. In truth, this second formation was the true killing move. As long as Zhang Xiaoxiao made too much of a ruckus in the formation, it would cause the qi of heaven and earth to fluctuate. Then once the two of them sensed each other, large amounts of lightning would gather in the sky and come down to deal with this fellow. To put it simply, the effect of this second formation was to create a man-made lightning tribulation. Although doing so would cause the mysterious sky bewildering tracks formation to crumble faster due to the power of heaven and earth, but it would also cause the greatest damage to the enemy. Naturally, it wasn't that Jun Moxi didn't want to settle things once and for all. For example, some ultimate killing weapon like the 10,000 Tribulations absolute killing formation. No matter who it was, as long as they entered it, they would be completely blasted to smithereens within a short period of time. But, firstly, there was too little time, and secondly, his cultivation was far from that level. There was no way he could create such a thing. The thick white fog continued to roil, and the area it enveloped grew larger and larger. Gradually, the entire mountain forest was enveloped. Just at this time, the ground suddenly shook violently. Large cracks also slowly appeared on the ground. Jun Moxi's eyes flashed. He was not surprised at all. He stood silently in the air, and with a wave of his right hand, the blood of yellow flame appeared in his hand. It was like a peerless beauty who had shed all her splendor. Her clothes were plain and simple. Zhang Xiaoxiao finally found a chance to turn things around, because he could clearly feel that his feet had touched the ground. This kind of carefree feeling of having his feet on solid ground actually made this Saint Venerable Zhang Xiaoxiao almost cry. But at this time, his mouth and nose had already been sealed by a block of ice. His Xian Qi was about to run out, and the only thing he could do now was to breathe. And in order to breathe, he had to first shatter the ice around his body. With his feet on solid ground, borrowing the external force, His Xian Qi finally flowed in reverse. His Qi sank into his dantian, and he gathered all his remaining strength to circulate it around his body. Peng! A crisp sound rang out, and the ice, mud, and stones all burst apart. Although he was underground, he had still blasted out a small piece of heaven and earth. Zhang Xiaoxiao tried his best to take 2 deep breaths of air. Although the air underground was damp and dirty, this feeling of finally being able to breathe again made Zhang Xiaoxiao feel that this damp and stinky air was like a garden filled with the fragrance of 100 flowers, refreshing his heart. If this had dragged on any longer, this Saint Venerable might really have suffocated to death. As long as one was human, they had to breathe. A Saint Venerable was still a human, and it wasn't strange for them to suffocate to death. As for why Da Xiao didn't continue using the power of earth to suppress Zhang Xiaoxiao, there was no other way. Jun Moxie's current limit of using the power of earth was only this much. Furthermore, even if Da Xiao could still maintain the power of earth, a Saint Venerable would definitely self-detonate at the last moment of life and death. If Da Xiao used the power of earth to suppress it, he would definitely receive a backlash. With Da Xiao's current strength, if he really received the backlash of a Saint Venerable head-on, even if it wasn't fatal, he would still be heavily injured. Since Jun Da Xiao already had a good plan in mind, he naturally wouldn't choose this kind of method. Zhang Xiaoxiao breathed in, and as he breathed in, he instantly felt his entire body filled with boundless energy. Zhang Xiaoxiao roared angrily and used his famous technique without holding back, earth-penetrating hand. A person's real name might be wrong, but his nickname would never be wrong. After living for thousands of years, this was the first time Zhang Xiaoxiao felt that his nickname was truly true today. Using this technique deep underground, if it wasn't the earth-penetrating hand, what else could it be? At this moment when he was buried deep underground, Zhang Xiaoxiao suddenly thought of another person. That person who was equally famous as himself, heaven-penetrating palm. Who knew when that guy would fully realize that his name was worthy of his name? Perhaps that would have to be in the 9 heavens, right? If that was the case, that fellow's ending would probably be even more miserable than him. The moment the earth-penetrating hand was unleashed, it was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Zhang Xiaoxiao fought madly all the way, his body flying straight up. Right now, he no longer knew how deep he had sunk into the ground. But based on his guesses, it was at least over 100 zhang deep. With such depth, even if he was a Saint Venerable, it was not an easy matter for him to charge up in one go. Comparatively speaking, if he were to change his direction, he would have to face the kind of soil and rocks that had not loosened. That would naturally be even more difficult to escape. So he chose the path that was more energy-saving, and that was to charge up along the same path he had fallen from. Jun Moxie looked at the ground trembling and shaking. The white fog in the air was also rolling like a pot of boiling water. A cold smile appeared on his lips. Come up quickly, there's an even more sumptuous feast waiting for you here. Have a good taste of the wonderful feeling of being struck by heavenly lightning. As expected, with a deafening roar, Zhang Xiaoxiao's body was wrapped in countless mud and rocks as he charged out of the ground. The moment he charged out, Jun Moxie clearly saw this earth-piercing hand take a deep, and heartfelt breath of air. Then, his body shot forward like a rocket. The moment Zhang Xiaoxiao charged out, he immediately realized that he was still in the thick fog. And the fog had already reached its limit. Even with his eyesight, he could not see anything. It was as if he was truly a blind man. His first thought was to immediately escape from the range of this thick fog. This was the enemy's trap. Staying here was equivalent to taking risks in the enemy's territory. So he didn't have the time to think any further and charged up high into the sky in one go. As long as he could charge out of this thick fog and reach a position where he could see the enemy, he would naturally be able to determine the direction and make the best use of the time to escape. Right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao did not even have the slightest thought of killing that black-robed man. It was not that he did not want to, but he did not dare to, and could not have. To think that there was such a strange and unfathomable method in this world. He did not even see the enemy's weapons and he nearly lost his life. This was the most dangerous encounter he had ever had in his life. If he acted rashly again, The slightest bit of carelessness, he would most likely die here. Zhang Xiaoxiao's arrogance had completely disappeared. But he immediately realized that he was wrong. What happened earlier was definitely not the most dangerous one in his entire life. Because right now it was. Looking at the scene before him, Zhang Xiaoxiao almost wanted to cry. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with shock and disbelief. This was truly unbelievable. As he charged upwards, the thick fog finally seemed to have thinned a little. He could even vaguely see the outside world. But he would rather not be able to see anything. Because, in front of his eyes, there were a few blazing bolts of lightning piercing through the thick clouds above his head. Then, they fought to be the first to strike down on top of his head. Oh my God! Zhang Xiaoxiao's entire body was practically frozen in fear. As a Saint Venerable, he was no stranger to the lightning tribulation. But even a Saint Venerable was just an ant on the ground in front of a lightning tribulation. At most, he was just a slightly stronger ant. Zhang Xiaoxiao did not have any time to consider. He immediately gathered all his Xian Qi above his head. That lightning bolt came really fast, so fast that he did not even have the time to raise his hand to block it. Boom. Chapter 1005. The third update. Right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao's appearance was no different from someone who just permed his hair and applied several bottles of strong gel. Even the number one hairstylist on Earth would be ashamed of their inferiority to this kind of hairstyling ability. No matter how much of a hairstylist you are, you're still using knives and scissors. This guy used lightning and risked his life for this hairstyle. The lightning would not appreciate any hairstyle or style. It mercilessly struck Zhang Xiaoxiao's head again and again. Zhang Xiaoxiao was stunned for a moment before he remembered to quickly descend. Thankfully, this old fellow's strength was truly shocking. Even though he'd endured such a barrage of lightning, the damage was still limited and not fatal, but no matter how limited it was, he was still injured. And wasn't forcefully resisting the lightning tribulation an idiotic action? Zhang Xiaoxiao hurriedly activated the 1,000 Kati descent again and descended with all his might. It was only when he was about halfway down that the lightning finally stopped chasing him and slowly dissipated. At this moment, the thunder in the sky crackled like firecrackers. The intensity of the thunder was definitely not inferior to the momentum of a battle between millions of troops in the human world, and the momentum of both sides beating the war drums at the same time. The pitiful Saint Venerable Zhang Xiaoxiao's clothes had already been turned into rags by this lightning feast. His face was charred black, and his entire body was covered in burn marks. The huge waves on his head had already turned into a chicken's nest, and when the wind blew, his hair that had already turned into ashes fluttered in the wind. Opening his mouth, he actually spat out a mouthful of smoke. However, Zhang Xiaoxiao already felt that his luck was not bad to be able to keep his life under this level of lightning tribulation. If he delayed any longer, his entire body would probably have been roasted by the lightning tribulation. What the fuck is this lightning tribulation? It's actually not much weaker than the lightning tribulation I went through when I went through the Saint Venerable Heavenly Tribulation. It nearly destroyed my soul. Zhang Xiaoxiao landed on the ground with lingering fear. Looking at the remaining Xian Qi in his body, it had already been weakened by more than half. In just this short period of time, he felt as if he'd been infinitely close to death twice. He'd truly experienced death and come back to life. Apart from the lingering fear, goosebumps appeared all over his body. Fuck, I was clearly only chasing after a golden Xian-free and natural physique. How did I end up encountering such a huge disaster? Was there any justice in this world? Just at this time, he suddenly sensed something strange. Zhang Xiaoxiao instinctively squatted down, and with a schwa sound, a shiny sword flew past his head, practically brushing past his scalp. The icy cold sensation froze all the way to the bottom of Zhang Xiaoxiao's heart. Zhang Xiaoxiao had yet to stand up when the sword flew back again, slashing towards his throat. Zhang Xiaoxiao maintained his horse stance and jumped like a toad, dodging the attack. Then this sword continued to attack him from all directions, up and down. Occasionally, he would be careless and let the sword graze his arm. His skin, which was originally extremely hard and even divine weapons would not be able to injure him, actually had a white mark on it. After a while, blood gushed out. His current strength had already been reduced by more than half, and this void-flying sword was clearly a top-notch divine weapon in this world. The strength of his body was no longer able to withstand the slashes of this sword. Zhang Xiaoxiao's mind was racing. All his clothes had already turned into strips of cloth, and under the cutting of the sword wind, the strips of cloth were all turned into butterflies, fluttering away. Then, this Saint Venerable expert would be in for a lot of fun. Right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao was completely naked, as if not even a piece of cloth was left. So every time he moved violently, he would always feel his crotch swinging back and forth, feeling extremely uncomfortable. After living for thousands of years, when had he ever encountered such an awkward situation? Zhang Xiaoxiao's old face had practically turned purple. She was angry, embarrassed, furious, and terrified. Zhang Xiaoxiao suddenly roared at the top of his lungs. "If you have the guts, come out and fight this grandpa to the death. What kind of real ability is a mere sneak attack?" Only now did Zhang Xiaoxiao realize that there was no one controlling that sword. In other words, a mysterious opponent was using the imperial sword technique to deal with him. And to be able to reach this level, it was at least an opponent on the same level as him. Such an expert had to use such a mischievous method to tease him, or even toy with him. Zhang Xiaoxiao was so angry that he could barely breathe. This was too humiliating. Suddenly, a mocking voice sounded from behind him. "Wow, as expected of a Saint Venerable expert, your buttocks are actually so white, and your dance is also good. If you go out and perform, you will definitely win the applause of the audience." Zhang Xiaoxiao's face instantly turned red. His hand subconsciously covered the embarrassing thing between his crotch. That voice rang out again. "We are all men, and there are no women here. What's the point of covering up? Besides, when you were performing that erotic dance just now, we saw everything. Isn't it a little too late to cover up now? Speaking of which, this old fellow is quite big. This is something that you should be proud of." Zhang Xiaoxiao's old face was completely red. He squatted down on the ground and covered his front and back with his hands. "What kind of hero are you to humiliate me like this? If you have the capabilities, give me a set of clothes. When this daddy is dressed properly, I will fight with you again." In his opinion, since they were experts of the same level, they were naturally people of great status. Even if they were to fight, they should use a fair and reasonable method of battle. Asking for a set of clothes from the other party, he thought that if it was him, he would definitely give it to the other party. After all, the other party had used such a method of battle and won just like that. It would be an unfair victory. But he had never imagined what kind of fellow he had met. That voice was filled with mockery. "What a joke. Do I owe you anything? To actually ask for clothes from me, why should I give you clothes? You were the one who was willing to run around with your buttocks bare. Who can you blame for this?" Zhang Xiaoxiao was so angry that he rolled his eyes. But right now, he was completely naked and extremely embarrassed. He couldn't possibly just fight like this, right? Left with no other choice, he lowered his voice and said, "Today, this old man admits defeat. You hurry and give me a set of clothes. This place is so secluded, and there are only wild mountains and valleys all around. Where am I going to get clothes for you? Aren't you making things difficult for me?" Jun Moxie looked at Zhang Xiaoxiao's pathetic appearance and almost couldn't hold back his laughter. Zhang Xiaoxiao thought about it and agreed. Who would bring another set of clothes when they came out to do business? This wasn't a vacation, and it was so close. If he still brought clothes out, that would be an idiot. "Then give me a set of clothes from your clothes." Zhang Xiaoxiao squatted down, one hand covering the front and the other covering the back as he said in a flustered and exasperated manner. He was truly too embarrassed and furious to ignore the positions of both parties. He had even forgotten that the fact that he had ended up in this state was the result of the other party's deliberate plotting. "AI, what are you thinking? The weather is so hot right now, and this old man is only wearing this set of clothes. I'm not wearing anything underneath. If I really gave it to you, wouldn't this old man be in the same state as you are now? How can you do to others what you don't want others to do to you?" Jun Moxie held back his laughter and continued to bluff. Zhang Xiaoxiao instantly understood that the other party was playing with him. Not to mention that he didn't have any clothes. Even if he did, he would definitely not give it to him. The moment he thought of this, all the suppressed anger surged up, and he no longer cared about his shame. In any case, there were only the two of them here, and no one else could see it. As long as he could kill this person, who would know that he was once in such a pathetic state? The moment he thought of this, Zhang Xiaoxiao removed his hands and slowly stood up. He said eerily, "Since you don't know how to appreciate my kindness, then don't blame this old man for being ruthless." With a loud roar, he circulated all the Xian Qi in his body and said word by word, "One, palm, penetrating, earth, palace." Following the shout, his right hand suddenly blossomed with an unusual radiance, and even more rapidly drew a half-circle in front of his chest. Then, with a whoosh sound in the air, the wind howled, and the entire sky and the earth were filled with the shadows of that palm, densely packed, forming an entire palm mountain, with a loud rumble, pressed over. Wherever the palm wind passed, the thick white fog in the air was stirred up, as if it had encountered a hurricane. On the ground, sand and pebbles were sent flying, and the sharp sound of the air being pierced was like the howling of thousands of ghosts. No less than thousands of palm winds came crashing down towards Jun Moxie. This palm truly displayed the true strength of this earth-penetrating palm. Although the power of his Xian Qi had already been reduced by more than half, the power of this palm was still enough to shake the heavens and earth. Jun Moxie was also shocked. When he had appeared earlier to mock and tease Zhang Xiaoxiao, he had thought that Zhang Xiaoxiao was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He had never imagined that he would still be able to unleash such a powerful attack. He still did not have the ability to receive this attack. But not being able to receive it did not mean that there was no way to deal with it. Jun Moxie chuckled lightly, and his body shot up with a whoosh, flying straight up. Killing intent filled Zhang Xiaoxiao's eyes, and his expression was resolute. Without any hesitation, his palm turned and shot up into the sky, chasing after his opponent. He had clearly been forced by Jun Duxiao to the point that he had lost all rationality. He would rather perish together with his opponent than suffer any more humiliation. The two of them, one in front and one behind, shot up into the sky like two sharp swords. The only difference was that one was masked and dressed in black, while the other was completely naked. But right now, Zhang Xiaoxiao could no longer care about this. Even if he was going to be the laughingstock of the world, he still had to teach this person who had humiliated him a lesson. It would be best if he could beat him to death, but even if he couldn't, he had to perish together with him. A person who had completely sunk into madness, whether it was his battle awareness or his explosive battle strength, was extremely shocking. Right now, the battle strength that Zhang Xiaoxiao was displaying was not inferior to when he was at his peak. But he didn't expect that the opponent had so many places to dodge. Why did he insist on flying up into the sky? Why did he risk meeting the lightning tribulation head-on? Chapter 1006. Just at this time, the figure in front of him suddenly disappeared. As if he had never appeared at all, Zhang Xiaoxiao was just looking for that bastard who dared to toy with him when another wave of heavenly lightning came crashing down, so he lured me here to use lightning to strike me. Damn it. However, he only had time to think of this when Zhang Xiaoxiao's head was already struck by more than 10 lightning bolts. His strength had already been reduced by half, and he was already forcing himself to explode with his full strength. Now that he was met with such a powerful attack, he could no longer withstand it. Zhang Xiaoxiao screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood, his body charred black as he fell down. A flash of sharp sword light appeared once again, shooting towards Zhang Xiaoxiao's chest at lightning speed. With a pu sound, the sword instantly pierced 3 inches into his flesh. Zhang Xiaoxiao was indeed a saint venerable expert. The toughness of his body was comparable to steel. Even with the blood of yellow flame's sharpness, it could only penetrate 3 inches into his flesh under such circumstances. Zhang Xiaoxiao howled miserably and slammed his palm against the hilt of the sword. The blood of yellow flame let out a mournful cry and shot out. But as the sword flew back, a gush of fresh blood spurted out from the wound. Zhang Xiaoxiao screamed again and spat out another mouthful of blood. Although the sword did not pierce through his body this time, the powerful sword qi had already entered his body and was wreaking havoc in his meridians. Zhang Xiaoxiao quickly gathered his xian qi, wanting to force the sword qi out of his body. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him, a pair of cold eyes flashing with a cold light. A pair of palms struck heavily on Zhang Xiaoxiao's chest with the force of a thunderbolt. This strike was solid and solid. Zhang Xiaoxiao roared angrily and kicked Jun Moxi's body, while his right hand also landed a heavy blow on the other party's chest. But right now, he had suffered heavy injuries. The strength he could unleash was probably not even 20% of his peak strength. But even so, it still caused Jun Moxi to tremble as if he had been struck by lightning. His internal organs trembled. Bang! Jun Moxi's body flew backward. But after this turn of events, Zhang Xiaoxiao was no longer able to suppress the majestic sword qi in his body. He only felt as if thousands of small knives were digging into his body at the same time, and he couldn't help but let out two cries as he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His entire body also fell down powerlessly. Two figures fell in opposite directions. The thick fog that had lingered in the air for a long time dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. After being bombarded by the heavenly thunder twice, the power of heaven and earth contained in the mysterious sky disorienting formation was completely exhausted. As the formation lost its effect, the true appearance of the mountain was naturally revealed. When his body landed on the ground, Zhang Xiaoxiao discovered that the thick fog had already dissipated. He propped himself up with great difficulty and stood up, glaring fiercely at Jun Moxi, who was also struggling to get up. "So it's you. So it turns out that you really pissed this old man off. So you only have the cultivation of Holy Emperor. He hasn't even reached level 4. How could this be?" As he spoke, he spat out another mouthful of blood, and his body swayed. Opposite him, Jun Dashao slowly stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Smiling lightly, he said, "You only found out now? I thought that you'd already seen through it. I've clearly overestimated your intelligence. I've misunderstood. If I'd seen through it earlier, would I have ended up in this state?" Zhang Xiaoxiao was so depressed that he nearly wanted to commit suicide. So the other party had been bluffing all along. In truth, he was really just a paper tiger that couldn't withstand a single blow. From the beginning to the end, he was only a holy emperor who had relied on some strange and unorthodox techniques to camouflage his strength, but he had been confused by the other party's pretense of mysteriousness, led by the nose all along. Not only had he missed the best opportunity to strike, he'd even unjustly fallen into the other party's meticulously prepared trap. First, he'd been buried alive, and then struck by the heavenly thunder twice. What was even more unforgivable was that he'd faced the enemy naked like this, suffering the greatest humiliation he'd ever experienced in his life. Zhang Xiaoxiao gritted his teeth so hard that they made cracking sounds. His eyes were wide open. At this moment, he even had the thought of swallowing Jun Moxi alive. But unfortunately, he knew that he could no longer do it. A series of consecutive blows had caused his xian qi to fall to the point where it was on the verge of exhaustion. And that strange sword qi that he'd never seen before was still destroying his meridians. With a light clang, a dim sword light flashed from afar. The blood of yellow flame flew back crookedly, landing in front of Jun Moxi. It was like a child who'd been wronged, buzzing. That strike of Zhang Xiaoxiao's had practically condensed all the xian qi he'd accumulated in his life. It had nearly caused the blood of yellow flame to crack. Right now, it could still forcefully fly back. This could already be considered not bad. You've worked hard. I'll immediately heal your injuries in a while. Jun Moxi comforted gently. I'll definitely give you a stronger body and a delicious meal. Be good, go back and rest first. The blood of yellow flame let out a weak cry and was kept into the Hongjun pagoda by Jun Moxi. Zhang Xiaoxiao, who'd been watching this scene the entire time, felt as if he'd been struck by lightning once again. His entire body trembled as he glared at Jun Moxi, panting heavily. So this is a demonic sword. It was the sword itself that was playing tricks. It's not that you really have the cultivation of the imperial sword technique. I'm going to die from anger. I'm really going to die from anger. This was the biggest doubt in his heart. The other party was clearly not a Saint Venerable expert. He didn't even touch the sword, so how was he able to control the sword? He'd seen it clearly just now. That sword was moving on its own. There wasn't a single hand controlling it, and there was no Xian Qi controlling the sword's movement. He'd always believed that it was the imperial sword technique. Only the highest level of the imperial sword technique in the legends could achieve this. Who would have thought that after fighting for so long, it was just him scaring himself? And he'd even scared himself until he was crippled. Jun Moxie stood up and smiled. No need to waste time. Speaking of which, this place can be said to be a beautiful place with beautiful scenery. It's a suitable place for peerless experts to fight. Come, I'll do as you wish and fight a Saint Venerable expert like you to the death. This time, it's a fair battle. Life and death, victory and defeat, it's up to the heavens. Zhang Xiaozhao's eyes widened and he spat out another mouthful of blood, collapsing onto the ground in grief and indignation. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, he was unable to suppress the injuries in his body. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. To think that there's such a shameless person in this world. Seeing that I don't even have the strength to move, you actually say that you want to have a fair battle with me. Fuck, you might as well find a corpse to have a fair battle with. That way, wouldn't your chances of winning be greater? Under the repeated blows and insults, Zhang Xiaozhao's injuries had already reached a state where they couldn't be any more serious. First, he'd suffered a setback in his confidence. Then he'd been struck deep into the ground, losing a great deal of his vitality. Then he'd been struck by the heavenly lightning twice. It had completely torn apart his protective Xian Qi, and it seemed like all his internal organs had collapsed. Then he'd received a fatal blow from the divine sword, and the sword Qi was still wreaking havoc in his meridians, and the fatal blow that Jun Moxie had gathered all the strength in his body had landed squarely on his chest. In that instant, all his internal organs had been completely crushed by the opponent, completely pulverized, with nothing left. At that time, his physical body was already on the verge of collapsing. Then, he'd unexpectedly discovered the opponent's true strength. In his frustration, he'd even suffered mental damage. Right now, he didn't even have the strength to move a finger. Tell me your name. Tell me. Zhang Xiaozhao's charred body was still twitching on the ground, as if he was trying his best to stand up. His tone was still filled with viciousness and hatred that could not be washed away even in 3 lifetimes. Panting, he said, "Tell me that I won't be able to take revenge in this lifetime. In the next life, this old man will look for you. Since I won't be able to take revenge in the next life, then in the next life, this old man will follow you to the end. It's a pity that you won't have the chance anymore." Jun Moxie shattered Zhang Xiaozhao's last hope with a single sentence. "Because I will definitely not allow your holy infant to escape. You really don't have a chance. You're welcome to try. I can let you die one more time." Zhang Xiaozhao instantly fell into despair. "Or, you can tell me your name." Jun Moxie rubbed his chin and said, "I'm really curious. An expert with a cultivation like yours must be someone famous in the Zhan family. Just who are you? You don't know who I am? You actually said that you don't know who I am?" Zhang Xiaozhao was stunned. Although he was in a life and death situation right now, he still felt that it was unbelievable. "I've already used my famous technique just now. You still don't know who I am?" Jun Moxie was also a little depressed. "I'm not someone from the Misty Mansion. How would I know who you are? Could it be that you're really famous? Although I don't know whether you're famous or not, but your butt is really white and pretty majestic. Although it's still a little lacking compared to this young master." "Ha, good, very good. Very good." Zhang Xiaozhao coughed and laughed. "Then I'll let both of us be confused." Suddenly, his face turned purple, and his entire body swelled up like a balloon. He laughed sinisterly and jumped up. "Then let the two of us be a pair of confused ghosts together. Let's go to the Yellow Springs together and not worry about loneliness." At this moment, he had actually chosen to completely ignite his soul, giving up the chance for his holy infant to escape, and directly chose to self-detonate. He wanted to perish together with Jun Dashao. This person was the one who had killed Zhang Tianji. Since Zhang Tianji's holy infant could not escape, then it would be difficult for him to escape as well. He had already suffered such great humiliation. Even if he had the chance to live, he did not have the face to continue living, and since the other party did not recognize him, then he might as well destroy his physical body as well, to avoid leaving a corpse and bringing endless trouble to the family. Right now, the Zhan family could not afford any more trouble. Go to the Yellow Springs together? You're destined to be disappointed. Have you forgotten that this young master promised to give my precious sword a feast? Even if you want to die, you have to get this young master's permission first. Jun Moxie charged towards Zhang Xiaoxiao's body that had already swelled up to the limit and could explode at any moment. Seeing that he was about to get close, sword light suddenly flashed. The blood of yellow flame struck again. It flew out of his hand. This time, the blood of yellow flame stabbed into Zhang Xiaoxiao's dantian without any obstruction. Chapter 1007. Zhang Xiaoxiao would never have dreamed that the other party would actually use it at such a critical moment when he said that he was going to heal the divine sword. His dantian was pinned down by the sword, and he couldn't even self-detonate. He could only watch as this demon-like sword absorbed the life essence that he had accumulated in his entire life. Zhang Xiaoxiao finally closed his eyes forever. How could Jun Moxie let go of something that could nourish his divine sword so much? This was a soul that had been completely ignited through burning. There were no impurities in it at all. It was an extremely pure and ownerless item. Since Zhang Xiaoxiao had chosen such a method of destruction, Jun Moxie would naturally grant him his wish. Although it was a different kind of method, the blood of Yellow Flame's originally dim body suddenly glowed with a strange blood-red color. After that, it gradually brightened up. Slowly, a brilliant light circulated around the sword. Finally, with a light pung sound, Zhang Xiaoxiao's body turned into dust that filled the air, completely disappearing into nothingness. The blood of Yellow Flame let out a light cry and flew up. It circled in the air and landed in front of Jun Moxie. A satisfied expression appeared on its face. Although the sword was still in a damaged state, the sword's spirit had already completely recovered. In fact, it had even surpassed its original state by quite a bit. The mental strength of two Saint Venerables had been completely devoured by it. This was an extremely huge amount of energy. If it was able to completely digest these two energies, the power of the blood of Yellow Flame would definitely rise to another level. As for the damage to the sword, that was secondary. With Jun Dashao's metal power, as long as there was a sufficient amount of metal, it would be as easy as flipping one's hand. Today's matter could finally be considered to have come to an end. Jun Moxie sucked in a deep breath of air. That was really close. The power of a Saint Venerable was indeed not something that the current him could contend against. Even if it was that final strike that was like a lamp without oil, it still caused him to suffer heavy injuries. If it wasn't for the fact that he'd planned and made countless arrangements, as well as the balance of the 5 elements' divine ability, it would really be hard to say what kind of ending would have happened today. Usually, the police would only end when the matter ended. It seemed like the reinforcements from the Misty Mansion were the same. A shadow flashed in the distance. The experts of the Misty Mansion finally arrived. When Miao Jingyun and the rest arrived, all they saw was a complete mess. Not only was the ground in a mess, but even more than half of the mountain ridges on both sides had collapsed. In the sky, a large patch of dark clouds was gradually dispersing. On the ground, countless places were charred black, and there were even puddles in some places. It didn't seem to have rained during this period of time. What was going on? The intensity of this battle could be seen just by looking at the scene. All the Saint Venerables present were shocked when they saw this scene. There was no need to see it with their own eyes. Just by looking at the scene, everyone could already picture a battle between Saint Venerables in their minds. The Zhan family's patriarch, Zhan Wuyun, stared blankly at the scene before him. Everyone, Hurry up and look around. See if there's any sign of Imo Junyi. Miao Jing-yun ordered. They had been searching the entire time and finally arrived here. Actually, if it was just based on speed, they would have arrived long ago. It was just that from afar, there wasn't any movement or sound at all. So no one had any intention of coming here, but by the time the loud sound of the formation breaking was heard by everyone, the battle had already ended. Chao Guofeng and the rest immediately ran through the forest. Not long later, a rousing voice rang out from the forest. Found him! Found him! After that, a Saint Venerable expert ran out with a whoosh sound, holding something in his arms. With a wry smile on his face, he muttered, "That brat is actually still sleeping." Everyone crowded over to take a look, only to see that prodigious brat with the free and natural physique sleeping soundly on the bed. What a good life, ah! Miao Jing-yun sighed with a complicated expression. Countless experts have traveled thousands of miles for him, risking their lives to kill him. But he's sleeping so soundly. Indeed, people with the same fate are different. Ah, Manor Lord, that brat is also not sleeping. Someone has sealed his sleeping acupoint? Someone said. Do I need you to say that? Do you think I can't tell? Miao Jing-yun shook his head and looked at the messy scene again. Let's hurry back. The two people who fought here must have already left. This matter caused a huge commotion in the Misty Mansion. But for some reason, this matter was completely suppressed. But after that day, no one brought it up again. It was as if such an earth-shattering matter had never happened in the Misty Mansion. However, the security at Jun Mosie's residence had become even tighter. On the surface, everything seemed to have returned to normal. However, all the great clans could feel that there was a turbulent undercurrent that was constantly surging. Perhaps they did not know when it would completely erupt. Therefore, all the great clans were all relaxed on the outside, but tense on the inside, ready to respond at any time. Instead, the Zhan family did not show any abnormalities on the outside. They still maintained that state of mutual hostility from before. But inside, the heavens had been turned upside down. The first thing Zhan Wuyun did when he returned to the Zhan family was to meet with old ancestor Zhan Luanhui. He gave a detailed report of what had happened today. Zhan Wuyun indeed did not know about Zhan Xiaoxiao's attack. And after he met with Zhan Luanhui also did not mention it, but there was still no news of Zhan Xiaoxiao by the afternoon of the second day. Zhan Luanhui was really anxious now. Zhan Xiaoxiao was one of the few experts in the Zhan family. And as a Saint Venerable, no matter how severe the injuries were, it was impossible for her to not return after such a long time. Even if her physical body was destroyed, the holy infant should have returned long ago. She couldn't have been destroyed in both body and soul, right? Zhan Luanhui immediately called Zhan Wuyun over and questioned him again. You're saying there are traces of fire on the battlefield? Hearing Zhan Wuyun's detailed description and hearing that there were traces of fire, Zhan Luanhui's face changed instantly. An extremely ominous premonition rose in his heart. To think that there would be traces of fire in a battle between experts. Then, yes, there are very clear traces of fire on that battlefield. Zhan Wuyun didn't understand why old ancestor would ask such a question, but he still answered carefully. He wanted to ask a few more questions, but when he saw Zhan Luanhui's ugly expression, he couldn't help but feel uneasy and swallowed his questions back into his stomach. It's fine for now. You may leave. Zhan Luanhui let out a deep sigh as he leaned back on the chair weakly. There was an indescribable fatigue on his face as he waved his hand. This disciple will take his leave. Zhan Wuyun carefully looked at Zhan Luanhui's expression and retreated in confusion. Zhan Luanhui closed his eyes. Inform Yi Xiao and Zhan Tu that I am going into seclusion. Get them to protect me. In this period of time, no one is to act rashly. No matter what happens in this period of time, no one is to disturb me. Everything will wait until I come out of seclusion. But how long will old ancestor be in seclusion this time? Zhan Wuyun probed. At most 3 months. If it's earlier, 1 month will do. Zhan Luanhui said with his eyes closed. But for some reason, Zhan Wuyun felt that Zhan Luanhui's tone was filled with the desolation of the setting sun, as if something bad had happened, The days passed really quickly. In a blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Today was the 500th birthday of the Misty Mansion's master, Miao Jing-yun. The entire Miao family was in jubilation. Jun Moxie could be said to be very idle these few days. When he had nothing to do, he would pretend to be cultivating. Of course, his progress would always cause the Holy Emperor to gasp in surprise. Occasionally, Miao Xiaomiao would come over for a chat. There were also some old fellows who would come over for a stroll, like recommending their granddaughters, great-granddaughters and so on. All in all, there were only 4 words: calm and peaceful. Tomorrow was Miao Jing-yun's 500th birthday. And the day after tomorrow was the day he would enter the spiritual herbal garden. His trip to the Misty Mansion was finally coming to an end. Perhaps after the day after tomorrow, he would be leaving this place and would never return to this land again. Although he had only stayed here for a short period of time, but the things he had done for the Misty Mansion were not little. At the very least, he had ruined the grand scheme that the Zhan family had been plotting for thousands of years. He had even caused the 2 Saint Venerables of the Zhan family to be completely annihilated. The Zhan family's influence that was at its peak was greatly reduced because of this, and it was very likely that the Misty Mansion had avoided a huge crisis. All these should be enough to offset his deception, right? Thinking of this, Jun Moxie finally let out a sigh. This kind of feeling of guilt was really hard to bear. In these few days, Miao Xiaomiao's gentleness made Jun Dushao feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. "Dummy, what are you thinking about?" Seeing that Jun Moxie was a little distracted, Miao Xiaomiao asked gently. In this period of time, Miao Xiaomiao had purposely shown all her gentleness to Jun Moxie and even called him dummy instead of Dushao. All these were just for that one sentence she had said a few days ago. "Jun Ye's heart is so bitter, I must use my gentleness to free him from his pain." "Nothing." Jun Moxie sighed. "Jun, can you tell me about her?" Rather than keeping it bottled up in his heart, it would be better for him to pour it all out. Perhaps that would make him feel more relaxed. If he kept keeping it in his heart, it would really become a psychological problem. Jun Moxie turned to look at Miao Xiaomiao in confusion. "That her?" Chapter 1008. Jun Moxie took a deep breath. He didn't understand what Miao Xiaomiao was thinking, but when he heard this, Mei Shuiyin's face, Guanqing Han's and Dugu Xiaoyi's graceful figures kept flashing in his mind. Jun Dushao was really homesick. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well tell her to give up. It might be a good thing to let her be sad for a while. It's better to let her be sad for a while than sad for the rest of her life. She was beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief and said while looking at the sky. Gradually, his tone became gentle, as if he was dreaming. Her hair was very long, very elegant, and she had a pair of big eyes. Her eyebrows were very beautiful. I often said with a smile that her eyebrows were like the crescent moon in the sky, but they weren't weak, they were more valiant. Miao Xiaomiao looked at him in a daze. Looking at his satisfied smile as he talked about his sweetheart, she suddenly felt a sour and painful feeling in her heart. A feeling called jealousy rose in her heart. Although she kept telling herself in her heart, "Don't be angry, don't be sad, one day I will officially replace that person's position in his heart," she still couldn't help feeling sad. So, his feelings for her were so deep. Her skin was very white. It's not an exaggeration to say that her skin was whiter than snow. She had an oval face, a tall figure, and likes to wear clothes whiter than snow. What I like to see the most is her wearing white clothes, with her elegant black hair fluttering behind her. Every time I see her, I have a feeling that this woman is not an ordinary person, but an immortal descending from the heavens. This kind of thinking is really sacred, or very pure would be more appropriate. She doesn't need to speak, nor does she need to do anything. Just by looking at her back, she makes people feel lonely, or unapproachable and mysterious. Miao Xiaomiao forced a smile and said, "She's really beautiful. Now that you mention it, I'm a little fascinated. I really didn't expect that there's such a beauty in this world. No, she's not just devastatingly beautiful. Comparing her with the most beautiful women in the world is a great blasphemy." I'm sorry, I'm not purposely praising her. She has another advantage, which is that she's never indecisive. As long as she decides on something, she'll immediately do it. She is really courageous. She once supported such a huge foundation all by herself, without anyone's help, but she still managed to hold on, facing countless strong enemies, so that the foundation did not decline. As Jun Moxie said this, he thought of Mei Shuiyin's stubbornness when she supported the Tian Fa forest all by herself, and couldn't help but reveal a trace of heartfelt pity. Also, she treats me extremely well. She'd rather sacrifice her own life than let me be hurt. Even once, for my family, she almost sacrificed her own life. I'm really very touched, very fortunate. To have such a beauty, what more could I ask for? The gentleness on Jun Moxie's face became more and more obvious, and a faint satisfaction appeared on his face. In his heart, a deep sense of gratitude rose. Such a beauty in this world, who could have such a close confidant? Shuiyan, to be able to have you in this life, what a blessing it is. It is really good. There was a voice in Miao Xiao Miao's heart that shouted, I can do it too. If she can do it, I can do it too. I can even do more than her and do it better. I can also disregard my own life for you. I can use my own life to protect everything that belongs to you. I can do it, I can definitely do it. But in the end, she didn't say it out. Because she knew that there were some things that could never be resolved just by talking about it. There was no use saying it, only doing it. That's right. In this world, I'm afraid there won't be another woman that can compare to her. Jun Moxie said with a sigh, to be able to meet her, I don't know how lucky I am, how many lives of good fortune I've accumulated. Then, Miao Xiao Miao's heart was filled with bitterness. After pondering for a long time, she finally asked the question that she wanted to ask the most. Then, how did she die? How did she die? Jun Moxie was shocked by this sentence, and looked at Miao Xiao Miao in a daze, saying, but she didn't die, how could she die? What are you talking about? At the end of his words, there was a faint anger rising. Miao Xiao Miao looked even more surprised than him. She couldn't help but jump up, saying, she didn't die? She actually didn't die? How could? Of course she didn't die. How could she die? Jun Moxie said unhappily. What was this girl talking about today? Miao Xiao Miao only felt that her brain was in complete chaos. How could this be? What was going on? It was him. She had forgotten one thing. All the facts that she had confirmed seemed to be just her and her mother's speculations. Are you talking about? Miao Xiao Miao asked carefully. Then who are you asking about? Jun Moxie was also confused. She's your wife? Miao Xiao Miao's expression looked like she was about to cry. Yes, she is my wife. Jun Moxie nodded, but he didn't know that this sentence had completely thrown Miao Xiao Miao into a bottomless abyss. A bottomless abyss from which there was no escape. You have a wife? She's still alive? Miao Xiao Miao screamed. Her voice wasn't very loud, but it carried a heart-wrenching pain. Yes. So what? Jun Moxie sighed in his heart, and only muttered to himself, a short pain is better than a long pain. A short pain is better than a long pain. A short pain is better than a lifetime of pain. You're already married? You said you're already married? Miao Xiao Miao took 2 steps back in a daze, her eyes staring at him. Suddenly, a trace of shock flashed past her face, her cherry lips opened, and she stared at Jun Moxie without blinking. Suddenly, tears flowed out of her eyes. Drops of tears fell to the ground, like pearls falling into the dust. Jun Moxie's heart couldn't help but twitch. Looking at Miao Xiao Miao's desperate expression, Jun Moxie's heart softened, but he also knew that if he softened at this moment, all his previous efforts would be in vain, so he forced himself to give an affirmative answer. I'm really sorry, if I don't let you be sad for a while, then I might very well harm you for the rest of your life. You're married? You're actually married? Miao Xiao Miao murmured to herself in a daze, and unconsciously staggered back, her face blurred with tears. At this moment, Miao Xiao Miao felt that her heart had fallen into a bottomless abyss. There was nothing she could do, only endless bewilderment. There was only one sentence that kept repeating in her mind: he's already married. He's actually married? Then she suddenly turned around and used her hand to cover her mouth to stop the blood that was about to spurt out. She could only see stars in front of her eyes. She allowed her tears to flow freely and onto her cheeks. Finally, she could not hold it in any longer and let out a muffled sob. She actually stumbled out of the room like a madman. When she reached the gate of the courtyard, she actually tripped and fell. Then she bounced up and ran away while crying loudly. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Little Beansprout glared fiercely at June Moxie, her face flushed with anger as she cursed, "Liar. You are a big liar. You're already married and you still came to seduce my family's miss. Despicable, shameless, lowly, and despicable." Saying that, she spat angrily and ran after Meow Xiao Meow. Bai Qifeng was currently sitting at the gate of the courtyard. Ever since the Saint Venerable attack, the 7 holy emperors did not dare to be negligent anymore. The 7 of them took turns to guard June Daxiao, afraid that something unexpected would happen again. Right now, it was Holy Emperor Bai's turn to be on duty. Bai Qifeng was surprised to see Meow Xiao Meow leaving with a broken heart. He could not help but be stunned. After a long time, he finally came to his senses. He hurriedly rushed over and complained, "You brat, can't you keep your cool? She's yours sooner or later, can't you wait until you're married to do it? Why do you have to rush things now, with her status? How can you do whatever you want?" Holy Emperor Bai did not have the habit of eavesdropping on young couples, and June Moxie would not let him hear either. Naturally, he did not know what was going on, so his guess was completely different from the truth. "What are you talking about? What's mine sooner or later? I didn't do anything to her." June Moxie shrugged, his face innocent. "You didn't do anything to her? What else do you want to do to her? She's already like that and you're still like this? How can you be like this?" Bai Qifeng said hatefully. "Young people are just too impulsive. This is great, just wait and see. It'll be strange if those old Meow family people don't skin you alive. You don't know how much the Meow family treasures this lass." Holy Emperor Bai shook his head and sighed. He paced a few rounds before saying with a worried expression, "I'd better hurry and find boss to discuss this matter. No matter what, I have to give her an explanation." Saying so, he left with a swoosh. June Moxie looked at Holy Emperor Bai leaving in a fluster, feeling a little confused. Could it be that this relationship has something to do with other important matters? What this and that, what is this and that, what is this and what is this? But looking at the direction Meow Xiao Meow left in, June Moxie felt a deep sense of regret, as well as a faint sense of loss. Perhaps you should have the happiness that belongs to you, and your lover should not be me. Sighing lightly, June Moxie walked to the door and looked at the spot where Meow Xiao Meow had fallen, feeling a slight stabbing pain in his heart. With Meow Xiao Meow's Shen cultivation, she actually fell on such a flat road. It could be seen how much pain her heart was in at that time, to the point where she didn't want to think about anything else. Suddenly, June Moxie's body shook. He took a few quick steps forward, and his gaze froze. Chapter 1009. This bright blood stain, under the illumination of the sun, did not change color at all. June Moxie gently wiped it with his finger and placed it in front of his eyes. His heart was in pain, heart's blood. It was actually heart's blood. Under the sudden and extreme blow of despair, Meow Xiao Meow, this infatuated woman, actually vomited out her heart's blood. This is the purest life essence of a human. This kind of consumption, even an expert with profound Shen cultivation would find it difficult to bear. Meow Xiao Meow was a weak woman. Even if her cultivation was not weak, how could she bear this kind of heart-wrenching pain? June Moxie followed the direction in which Meow Xiao Meow ran a few steps, and carefully examined the ground. Sure enough, he saw drops of blood meandering along the flagstone road, as if a young girl's heart was gradually breaking on this road, and completely collapsing. June Moxie slowly straightened his body, and deeply sighed. His eyes looked at the road, and for a moment, his heart was in a mess. Miao Xiaomiao's temperament was gentle and obedient, and it could be said that she loved him wholeheartedly. This was not something that June Moxie did not know. Moreover, Miao Xiaomiao, a proud daughter of the heavens, was so obedient to a foreign boy who, apart from his extraordinary talent, was considered as a nobody. She was even afraid that he would be unhappy and thought of all kinds of ways to make him happy. Just this kind of true love, how rare was it? This kind of affection had really surpassed the secular world. In terms of appearance, she was above Guan Qin Han and Duge Xiao Yi, and even not inferior to Mei Xuan. It could be said that she was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city, and her appearance was peerless. In terms of talent, she was even more outstanding in zither, chess, calligraphy and painting, poetry, songs and martial arts. Such a beauty, how could June Moxie not be moved? In fact, in the face of such a stunning beauty throwing herself into his arms and opening her chest, how many men in this world wouldn't be moved? But being moved was one thing, and accepting it was another matter altogether. If it was only for the sake of her man's desire and vanity, she would easily agree and give him hope. Furthermore, if she couldn't do it, then such an outstanding young lady would be destroyed by her own impulsiveness. June Moxie could not accept it. If Miao Xiaomiao was an ordinary girl from any family in the Xian continent, June Moxie was confident that he could settle this matter thoroughly and let him repay this deep affection with the most satisfactory explanation. He was even more confident that he could give Miao Xiaomiao the happiness that she expected. However, Miao Xiaomiao was the Misty Mansion's Miao family's #1 daughter. She was also the beloved daughter of the master of the Misty Mansion. Witnessing the huge power that the Misty Mansion had displayed these few days, even the arrogant June Moxie was shocked. The power of the Misty Mansion was concentrated and strong. It was even above the 3 Holy Lands. Just thinking about it made June Moxie's heart beat like a drum. Although it wasn't to the extent of fear, there was still a sense of dread. Of course, these were not the main reason. The main reason was that the Misty Mansion was a special space that was independent of the Xian continent. Even though there wasn't much difference between it and the mortal world, it was still isolated from the Xian continent. As long as he went out this time, without the permission of the Misty Mansion, he could forget about coming back. If he wanted to forcefully tear open the space and enter the Misty Mansion, then he would have to reach the strength of the 9 Nether First Young Master when he created the Misty Mansion. Even with June Moxie's conceit, it was still an unreachable time for him to reach that level of strength. Could Miao Xiaomiao wait till that time? Wouldn't that make her waste her youth, waiting for the slimmest hope? So, when Miao Xiaomiao had just expressed her feelings, June Moxie had already realized what Miao Xiaomiao would have to bear if the two of them were to be together. That heavy burden was not something that Miao Xiaomiao could bear. The most likely outcome was that the two of them would turn against each other in the blink of an eye. His conscience would be uneasy for the rest of his life, and Miao Xiaomiao would suffer for the rest of her life, alone for the rest of her life. In fact, there was a high possibility that she would perish right here and now. I hope you can find your own happiness and forget me forever. And I, this passerby, after the day after tomorrow, I will also leave this place forever. Perhaps in this life, I will never take a step into the Misty Mansion again. June Moxie straightened his body and looked at the dark red bloodstains on his fingertips. He then muttered in a somewhat melancholic manner. A light breeze blew, causing his white robes to flutter. His hair fluttered in the wind, occasionally brushing against his face. This made June Moxie feel that this seemed to be Miao Xiaomiao's sorrowful and despairing state of mind. Very quickly, Bai Qi Feng found Chao Guofeng and the rest. The 7 old men sat together, sighing heavily. June Moxie didn't seem to be in a good mood. So, the 7 of them asked him a few questions. However, June Moxie wasn't in a good mood at the moment. So, he didn't reply. Suddenly, a loud bang was heard from the entrance. It seemed as if someone had kicked the door. The 7 of them stood up at the same time and looked outside. The 7 holy emperors could be said to be in a state of panic recently. Seeing that someone had come looking for trouble, how could they be polite? Each of them circulated their powerful xian qi and prepared for battle. But the moment they saw the person who had come, the 7 old men were like deflated balloons, all wilting. 2 tall and skinny men in black walked in with an abnormally cold expression. Behind these 2, the originally wide-open door seemed to have turned into a pile of wood shavings. If used to start a fire, it would definitely be the best material. Brother Miao, I wonder what has caused the 2 of you to come here? Chao Guofeng laughed dryly and stood up. These 2 were the personal guards of the Manor Lord of the Misty Mansion. Both of them had the terrifying strength of a second-level Saint Venerable, even stronger than Zhan Xiaoxiao whom Jun Moxie had killed earlier. They could be said to be the greatest guarantee of the safety of the Manor Lord of the Misty Mansion. Moreover, these 2 people were a pair of twin brothers. Miao Dao, Miao Jian. These 2 brothers were known as the ultimate saber and sword kill. Once they joined forces, their strength would increase even more, and they could display a shocking might that was greater than 1 + 1 + 2. With the 2 of them by Miao Jingyun's side, it was truly more reassuring than having an army of 10,000. In the history of the Misty Mansion, the strength of the Manor Lord had never been the strongest. But the personal guards of the Manor Lord had to at least have the cultivation of a Saint Venerable. Just like the various patriarchs of the Misty Mansion, the strength of the Manor Lord might not be that high. Because those with true talent in cultivation would need to have ample time to cultivate, allowing the family to maintain a strong battle prowess. Only then could they ensure the prosperity of the family. If such a genius took the position of the Manor Lord, he would definitely have to be distracted by all sorts of external affairs. Naturally, his xian cultivation would not be able to improve quickly, and it would undoubtedly be a great waste. For example, these 2 personal guards of the current Misty Mansion Manor Lord, Miao Jingyun. Their seniority was equivalent to Miao Jingyun's 2 uncles, and their xian cultivation had long reached the pinnacle of perfection. Ever since Miao Jingyun became the Manor Lord of the Misty Mansion, the 2 of them had always been by his side. In these hundreds of years, they had never left each other's side. But now, the 2 of them had actually left Miao Jingyun's side and appeared here. And without saying a word, they directly kicked down Chao Guofeng's door. This already proved Miao Jingyun's current attitude. It was not a rare thing to kick down 2 ordinary wooden doors. Not to mention a Saint Venerable, even a gold xian expert would be able to do it easily. But this action proved that the rage in the hearts of these 2 Saint Venerables had already reached an uncontrollable level. Chao Guofeng and Bai Chi Feng exchanged a glance and sighed in their hearts. Looking at Jun Moxie, they thought to themselves, if this brat had been a little more obedient towards the daughter of another family, how would such a disaster have happened? But now, things had really gotten out of hand. From the looks of it, this matter had already incurred the wrath of the Manor Lord. It was likely that they wouldn't even be able to find someone to plead on their behalf. Don't look at how Chao Guofeng had dared to fight with the Manor Lord for a disciple. But in front of these 2 old masters, he didn't even dare to say a single word of disrespect. It seemed like the other party was too powerful. More importantly, they were not in the right. By the orders of the Manor Lord, we summon Mo Junyi for questioning. Unrelated people are to leave immediately. Miao Dao Lengling glared at Chao Guofeng, giving a stern warning. Then, he turned his cold gaze back to Jun Moxie's face. Brother Miao, for the Manor Lord to summon Junyi so late at night, is there any important matter? Bai Chi Feng stammered and asked with a trace of hope. Could it be that the Manor Lord needs to report to you for something important? Miao Jian was even more impolite as he stood with his hands behind his back and looked at Jun Moxie. Brats, stand up. Come with us. Wait. Chao Guofeng suddenly stepped forward. My 2 esteemed guards, even if Junyi is in the wrong, it is because this old man and the others did not teach him well. The 7 of us are willing to go together to receive punishment. Please allow us to follow. Miao Dao and Miao Jian's expressions were businesslike. Chao Guofeng also did not address him as Brother Miao anymore. What if the other party said, Brother Miao is also someone you can call? That would really be a huge loss of face. None of your business. Chao Guofeng, You are also a veteran of the Misty Mansion. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't get involved in everything blindly. Miao Dao's sharp gaze still landed on Jun Moxie's face. Lengling said, for thousands of years, the so-called geniuses that have been killed by this old man's hands, although not many, they are definitely not few. Today, even if there is another person with the legendary free and natural physique, it might not be considered much. Brat, are you coming with us or not? The meaning behind her words was very clear. If you are not willing to come with us obediently, I don't mind bringing a corpse back to report. Jun Moxie had originally planned to go with them. After all, these two must have come because something had happened to Miao Xiao Miao. Although Jun Moxie's intentions were good, with such an outcome, he still felt guilty in his heart. Going to take a look and explain was also something that could not be faulted. Even if you guys did not come, I would still go and visit. Chapter 10:10. When had Jun Daxiao ever tasted such a thing before? You're rude to me, so I'll naturally return you an even more rude one. Although this young master feels slightly guilty towards Miao Xiao Miao, your Miao family is still greatly indebted to her. If not for this young master, your Miao family might have already run out of luck, and the Misty Mansion would have been removed from the list. To actually dare to be so fierce to me, Miao Dao's expression instantly turned cold. He stared at Jun Daxiao with a gaze as sharp as a knife's edge. Brat, don't think that just because you're the only one with the free and natural physique, you can act so arrogantly. In these 10,000 years, no one with the free and natural physique has appeared, but the Xian continent is still the Xian continent, and the Misty Mansion is still the Misty Mansion. This world will not change because of a single person. Do you really think that you're that amazing? That makes a lot of sense. Jun Moxie Lengling looked at him and crossed her legs. It's precisely because there's nothing amazing about the free and natural physique. Without the free and natural physique, there's still the sun in the day and the moon in the night. That's why this young master is so generous as to ask you to kill one. If there's really a lot of them, wouldn't it be even more meaningless for you to really kill them? There were no absolutes in this world. The world might not change because of a single person, but this single person referred to the majority of ordinary people. Because there was an extremely small portion of people who were not restricted by this restriction, and the world would really change because of the wishes of this small portion of people. Miao Dao's eyes flashed with killing intent. Miao Jian cursed in his heart. The Manor Lord's order was only for the two of them to bring this brat with the free and natural physique back, but he definitely didn't say anything about killing him. Boss's threat had failed, and he had instead fallen into a situation where it was difficult to back down. If Boss was angered and really killed this brat without a care, then the two of them would really be in big trouble. However, the two of them had never imagined that at such a young age, this Mo Junyi would actually have such a stubborn attitude. This sort of arrogance was rather befitting of his free and natural physique. Mo Junyi, even if you're not afraid of death, don't tell me you don't care about the lives of your 7 masters? Miao Jian asked solemnly, you must know. Chao Guofeng and the others have to bear a large part of the responsibility for your actions. Do you really have the heart to see the efforts of the 7 of them for thousands of years go up in smoke because of your momentary impulse? Jun Moxie was still looking at Miao Dao, his eyes calm and sharp. He was not moved by Miao Jian's words at all, not even blinking. Miao Dao stared for a long time and was finally surprised. This brat's mental fortitude was too abnormal. Under the stare of a Saint Venerable, he was actually not at a disadvantage at all. No one in the younger generation could compare to him in terms of mental cultivation alone. Not to mention the younger generation, even a slightly weaker Holy Emperor expert would not be able to do it. Although he was afraid of hurting him and did not use all of his mental pressure, when he was provoked by this brat earlier, he had inadvertently released a bit of it. This kind of huge aura, mixed with the cold killing intent that he had accumulated for thousands of years, was not something that an ordinary person could withstand. If it was someone else, even if they were an expert with considerable cultivation, their mind would have long been filled with illusions, and their mind would have collapsed. But this little fellow's eyes were actually as clear as usual, truly impressive. Meow Dao finally shifted his gaze and snorted coldly. Good brat. As expected of the legendary free and natural physique possessor, your guts are really big. No wonder Xiao Miao was so angry. Although his tone was as cold as before, there was no lack of praise in his words. But when he said this, his voice became furious again. Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that something big had really happened to Miao Xiao Miao? Don't threaten me. I won't fall for your tricks. I will definitely go to the Miao family, but not because of your so-called threat. Jun Moxie stood up slowly. Lengling said, Miss Miao Xiao Miao's matter really started because of me. Even if you didn't mention it, I would still go. I will never run away from my responsibilities. But if you threaten me, hee. Jun Moxie laughed coldly. Even if there are mountains of corpses and rivers of blood, I will not go. If you have the ability, you can bring a dead person there to report. Jun Dashao's temper had always been like this. Jun Moxie could use any means to achieve his goals, but if such means led to any consequences, he would never run away. No matter what the consequences of what he had done were, he would bear all the consequences himself. But if anyone threatened him during this period, then I'm sorry, no matter who you are, no matter what reason you have, no matter what stance you have, if I say I'm not interested, then I'm not interested. I'm not interested even if I have to die a horrible death. This tone, from his previous life to this life, he had never yielded to anyone. Even when facing two Saint Venerables who were far stronger than him, he was still so overbearing. In fact, even if he were to face the 9 Nether First Young Master right now, he would still do the same. There would not be any change. In this world, on Earth, in the mortal world, there was no exception. This was the pride that only Jun Moxie had. Jun Moxie's straight back and that extremely cold gaze let the two Saint Venerables know that this brat was determined not to give in to their threats. In that moment they were really in a dilemma. Before they came, they had never imagined that this brat's temper would be so stubborn and smelly. But they couldn't beat him or kill him. This was really making them anxious. Junyi, since the Manor Lord is looking for you, then you should make a trip. I believe it's not a big deal. It's just a small matter between men and women, it'll be fine once it's settled. Chao Guofeng saw that the atmosphere had become stiff. The other party was two Saint Venerables. If they really acted rashly, it would be useless even if he sacrificed his life. Jun Moxie raised his chin and looked at Miao Dao arrogantly. Whether I want to go or not is one thing, but I will definitely not do anything under threats. If you want me to go, you have to take back what you said just now. Only then will there be room for discussion. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Lengling said, otherwise, no matter how strong you are, even if you can forcefully capture me, you'll only be a person who doesn't speak. Or perhaps, there'll be another dead person when you get there. Jun Moxie's words were exactly what the two Miao Dao brothers were thinking. They were just planning to capture him when he was unprepared and leave immediately. But being reminded like this, they couldn't help but be stunned. If you don't say a word after you go, what's the use? If you don't even have your little life, then things will be even more serious. But, speaking, how can you force him? Especially, for the sake of Miao Xiao Miao's heart? Miao Dao's expression changed drastically. Suddenly, he stomped his feet fiercely and said with a dark face, fine. You brat, you win. I take back what I said just now. Is it okay now? He glared fiercely at Jun Moxie, thinking, see how I deal with you in the future. You made me lose face today, I'll definitely make you regret it in the future. With the idea of a gentleman's revenge, 10 years is not too late in his mind. Taking back the words was not so difficult to say. That's more like it. If I said that earlier, there wouldn't be such twists and turns. How could Jun Moxie not know what this old guy was thinking, but he was about to leave this place, so he naturally didn't take it to heart. Even if he didn't leave, with his ability, what ability did this old guy have to deal with this young master? He smiled in satisfaction and urged, then what are you waiting for? Why aren't you leaving? Didn't you say that the Manor Master has something to discuss with me? Miao Dao and Miao Jian, the two great Saint Venerables, were exasperated at the same time. It was you who refused to leave just now, and now it's you who is rushing to leave? Are you crazy, brat? The Manor Master has something to discuss with you? What are you thinking? Are you worthy? Although Jun Moxie was arguing, he was also very worried in his heart. After all, if something big happened to Miao Xiaomiao because of what happened today, then he was afraid that he would not be able to live in peace for the rest of his life. So in terms of anxiety, he was actually even more anxious than the two in front of him. Brat, come with me. Miao Jian grabbed his arm, and the next moment, Jun Moxie found himself in the air as if he was riding on the clouds. When Xiao Guofeng and the others chased after them, the three were already far away. Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. The strength of these two was truly not for show. But looking at their speed, it was already not a small matter. Even Zhang Xiaoxiao was not a match for them. Looks like the foundations of the Miao family are also quite deep. It turned out that Miao Xiaomiao's soul was broken in her grief and despair. Not long after she walked out, she could no longer hold on and fainted. Little Beansprout carried her all the way back to the Miao family, instantly causing a huge commotion. The entire Miao family was busy preparing for Miao Jingyun's 500th birthday. Everyone in the Miao family, regardless of their status, were all gathered at home. When they saw the precious darling of the Miao family being carried back in a barely breathing state, they were all greatly shocked. Miao Jingyun was even more enraged. Someone actually dared to injure his precious daughter on the eve of his birthday? Wasn't that purely making things difficult for the Miao family? Wasn't this too gutsy? After placing Miao Xiaomiao on the bed, Miao Jingyun and the rest rushed in like a swarm of bees. When they took her pulse, everyone's brows were furrowed. Miao Xiaomiao's injuries were not light. Due to the blockage of her meridians, her primordial spirit had been injured. Especially, when her primordial spirit had yet to form a true primordial spirit, such a huge problem had occurred. It was truly a serious matter, and there would be no end to the trouble. Once the primordial spirit was injured, the 5 viscera would be damaged. In just a short moment, Miao Xiaomiao had already fallen into a deep coma. This sort of coma was half caused by the damage to the 5 viscera, and the other half was caused by Miao Xiaomiao's subjective consciousness. With all her hopes turned to dust, all her beautiful fantasies had become bubbles. Right now, Miao Xiaomiao didn't even want to wake up. If she didn't wake up in time, she would probably have to lie down like this for the rest of her life. This sort of situation was somewhat similar to Jun Moxie's mother, Dongfang Wenxin, who had been bedridden for 10 years, unable to wake up. If the person involved didn't want to wake up, no matter how skilled the doctors were, they could do nothing about it. Everyone in the Miao family was completely helpless, and all of them had lost quite a bit of their hair. Madame Miao even cried out loudly, and she almost fainted. After being busy for half a day, everyone finally remembered that there was a witness beside them, Little Beansprout. They hurriedly called her over to ask what had happened. Little Beansprout naturally didn't dare to hide anything. Furthermore, this little lass was currently filled with resentment towards great prodigy Mo with the free and natural physique. Thus, she recounted the entire matter from beginning to end. Although she didn't add fuel to the story, the resentment in her tone caused everyone to be enraged. This Mo Jun, you really didn't know how to appreciate favors. On the spot, someone suggested to directly capture that fellow with the free and natural physique and light him up alive. But Madame Miao looked at her daughter's pale face. Even in her coma, she was still begging again and again. Junyi, do you really not want me anymore? You really don't want me anymore? Chapter 10-11. Madame Miao knew that this kind of heart disease needed medicine to be cured. If everyone really killed Mo Junyi in a fit of agitation, then her daughter would probably never wake up again. No one had expected that in such a short period of time, Miao Xiaomiao would fall in love with this Mo Junyi to such an extent. Actually, this wasn't too surprising. Miao Xiaomiao was an extraordinary woman who dared to love and hate. Such a woman would love crazily and crazily. Once her heart belonged to someone, She would give it her all with all her heart, soul, and spirit. A wisp of her heart had long been firmly tied to Mo Junyi. In her heart, there was no longer any space for anything else. Loving too deeply was also a kind of extremity. So Madame Miao immediately mentioned that no matter what that Mo Junyi had done, at this moment, only he could wake Miao Xiao Miao up. The only thing they could do now was to bring him over and wake Miao Xiao Miao up first before thinking about anything else. Miao Jingyun and the rest were all experienced people. The moment Madame Miao mentioned it, they already understood everything. So Miao Jingyun immediately gave the order for the two guards to move out personally. They had to get Mo de Xiao here in the shortest time possible. After the two guards left, the Miao family members were all waiting anxiously. Everyone's hearts were burning with anxiety as they paced around the main hall. When some of the disciples in charge of external affairs came over to ask what else needed to be done, they were directly chased out by the group of elders. The atmosphere in the Miao family fell into an unprecedented pressure. At this moment, there was a schwatch sound in the air. The two guards appeared in front of the courtyard at the same time. Their hands loosened and a youth fell to the ground. He staggered a little and stood up. His black and white eyes were very calm as he looked at the angry faces of the people. There was not the slightest hint of fear. "You're Mo Junyi?" The one who spoke was a middle-aged man. This person was gentle and elegant, and he had a scholarly air about him. Not only did this person not look like a Xianqi expert, he looked more like a learned scholar. In truth, Jun Mo Xie could clearly tell that this person's cultivation was extremely low. In fact, he might be the weakest person in this room. But this person's aura was extremely extraordinary, and it was not below Manor Lord Miao Jingyun's. This could be said to be extremely shocking. Another point was that he could sense a trace of extremely profound heaven-earth qi from this person. With all these factors, Jun Mo Xie instantly confirmed the identity of this scholarly middle-aged man. This person was definitely Miao Xiao Miao's father, Miao Huanyu. Only he, with a mere spirit Shen cultivation, could be the first to speak in the Miao family that was filled with experts, even before the manor lord of the misty illusory manor, Miao Jingyun. Only this legendary owner of the spiritual herbal garden could have a trace of the mysterious natural energy of heaven and earth that even peak Shen practitioners could not possess. This junior is indeed Mo Junyi. And this is Uncle Miao? This junior pays his respects. Jun Moxie looked around and smiled suavely as he asked. As expected of a young talent. Just this calmness and observation skills alone is already worthy of the reputation of the free and natural physique. Miao Huanyu faintly smiled and deeply looked at him. After praising him, he calmly said, "Young master, please." This was not just a simple compliment. It had to be known that any young man in his teens or 20s would probably be trembling all over if he were to suddenly fall from the sky and immediately face the wrath of hundreds of saint-level experts. But this Mo Junyi was different. He was truly different. Just now, he had been thrown down from the sky, but he was still able to maintain his composure. He even had the leisure to carefully observe the expressions of the crowd. Moreover, the moment he opened his mouth, this youth who had never seen him before had already recognized him just by guessing. This was not something that could be achieved with just calmness alone. At the very least, it required a meticulous mind, observational skills, and meticulous reasoning skills. Possessing all these was equivalent to possessing the basic requirements to become an unrivaled expert. Not to mention that this person also possessed the legendary free and natural physique. Right at this moment, a loud roar came from inside. "What nonsense are you spouting? What nonsense are you still spouting? Hurry up and get that little bastard to scram in here." Following this roar, the entire hall shook as if it was about to leave the ground. Madame Miao was by her husband's side at this moment. Looking at the young man who had captivated her daughter's soul, she instantly felt that something was off. At first glance, although this young man could not be considered handsome and could even be said to be the most ordinary of young men, his every move was unexpectedly charming. His speech and actions were calm and at ease, neither servile nor overbearing, giving off a feeling of ease and ease. She could not help but feel a little admiration for him in her heart. Only such an outstanding person would be able to captivate my precious daughter, but this fellow's methods were really too despicable. What do you think of this lad? Madame Meow's eyes were fixed on June Moxie as he walked in. Thinking about her daughter, she could not help but ask her husband in a soft voice. Excellent. Miao Huanyu's eyes were filled with deep thought as he watched June Moxie walk forward step by step. Nodding his head heavily, he said, "In the younger generation of the Misty Mansion, no one can compare to this lad. I believe that even in the entire Xian continent, he would definitely be the #1 character. If Xiao Miao's life can really be entrusted to this lad, you and I can rest assured." Madame Miao was shocked and could not help but open her mouth wide. Although her husband was frail and sickly from a young age, he was extremely knowledgeable and talented. Furthermore, his foresight was extremely unique. There had never been anyone who could make him give such a high evaluation in just one meeting. Furthermore, this was only their first meeting, and they had not even had an in-depth conversation, but he had already given such an evaluation. And the seriousness in his tone was something she had never seen before. Xiao Miao's foresight is really not bad. It's worth it to be injured for this lad. Miao Huanyu threw down this sentence and followed June Moxie into the hall. So what if his foresight is not bad? I heard that he already has a wife. Does he really want our Xiao Miao to be his concubine? Is it really worth it to look down on our daughter like this? Madame Miao muttered unhappily, her eyes involuntarily glancing at the exquisite pavilion at the side. Her eyes were filled with deep concern. That was where Miao Xiao Miao's chamber was located. Everything is decided by the heavens. As long as Xiao Miao is willing, even if she becomes a concubine, it might not necessarily be a bad thing. Miao Huanyu's back was facing Madame Miao as he lightly threw down these words. The younger generation has their own fortune. Why do you have to worry so much? After saying this, his figure had already disappeared into the hall. Madame Miao was stunned for a moment before she stomped her feet hatefully and muttered, "How can I not worry about my own daughter? Do you think everyone is like you? You're so heartless towards everything, so indifferent towards everything, and don't put anything in your eyes. In your heart, there's only that tree, there's no room for anything else." Xiao Miao said that we treat each other with respect and have never quarreled. How could I not want to quarrel with you? Unfortunately, you won't even give me such a chance. Wiping away her tears, she also followed him in. Under the watchful gazes of hundreds of people, June Moxie finally walked into the hall. Among these hundreds of gazes, more than half of them looked as if they wanted to eat him alive. June Moxie suddenly felt as if he had entered the mighty Tiger Hall. At this moment, if someone suddenly shouted, "The heavenly king overpowers the earthly tiger," most likely, June Dashao would subconsciously flip his robes and reply, "The pagoda overpowers the river demon," and then strike a few poses. The manor lord of the Misty Mansion, Miao Jingyun, was sitting on a large chair in the center like a statue. And it was actually a tiger skin chair, even more so. At this moment, Miao Jingyun no longer had the aura of a king that could control the world. His eyes were staring fiercely at June Moxie as he panted heavily, causing his originally elegant beard to flutter wildly in the wind. "Mo Junyi, you brat, you really have some guts." Miao Jingyun slammed the table fiercely, and a loud sound rang out. "Do you know your crimes? AI, don't say such useless things. If there's anything, it's better to just say it directly." June Moxie waved his hands and said, "The longer we drag things out here, the more difficult it will be to settle things. It's better to be more straightforward, Manor Lord." The moment these words left his mouth, everyone was stunned. No one had expected that this brat would say such words in such a situation. Only the two brothers were not too surprised. Naturally, it was the two brothers, Miao Dao and Miao Jian. This brat was not even afraid of death. A mere "do you know your crimes" was not enough to scare him. "You brat, do you know why this old man called you here?" Miao Jingyun furrowed his brows and asked. Raising his eyes to look at Miao Dao and Miao Jian, the two of them hurriedly shook their heads, indicating that they did not say anything on the way here. This brat had already offended all of us brothers. How could we be so kind as to remind him? What's so hard to guess? Xiao Miao left my place crying today. June Moxie sighed and said. When I followed her out, I saw that she was vomiting blood, and I knew that something was wrong. I was about to pay her a visit, but I was caught under the arms of these two big shots. I believe that if not for Xiao Miao's accident, you two would not be in such a hurry to look for me. Besides, it's useless to look for me if something happened to others. Good lad, good lad. Miao Jingyun was so angry that his beard became even more disheveled. So you already knew, to think that you were still pretending to be ignorant. What pretending? What do I have to pretend to be ignorant about? Alright, let's not talk about such useless things. How is Xiao Miao now? Ever since June Moxie came in, he had already sensed that something was wrong. From the looks of it, Xiao Miao's situation was even more serious than he had expected. Otherwise, why would this manor lord of the Misty Mansion, who would not change his expression even if a mountain collapsed in front of him, be so angry? Chapter 10-12. June Moxie was truly tongue-tied. Before he came, he'd already thought of the situation as serious as possible. But he'd never imagined that it would be this serious. This sort of symptom was exactly the same as his mother, Dongfang Wenxin's. At the end of the day, it could only be summed up in one sentence: dead heart. Only when one loved someone wholeheartedly, and then the lover suddenly left, would this sort of unique symptom appear. This sort of situation might not even happen once in billions and billions of people. This was because those who experienced such a situation were all extraordinary women who were passionate and passionate. Moreover, their feelings for their loved ones were so deep that they couldn't live alone. This was a phenomenon that would only occur. June Moxie had never imagined that he'd only interacted with Xiao Miao for a short while, but this pure and innocent girl's feelings for him had already reached such a level. In that instant, June Nemosie's heart swayed inexplicably. Was he really going to let down such a woman's deep feelings? But, you still have the mood to do this. Miao Jingyun roared and gritted his teeth. Mo Junyi, if you can't wake my granddaughter up today, then the flesh on your body will be the food on this old man's banquet tomorrow. After saying that, he didn't wait for June Moxie to reply and waved his hand angrily. Bring him in. If he can't be cured, directly skin him and make him into a spoon for this old man. To be able to say such words, it was clear that this number one big shot of the Misty Mansion had already gone mad with anger. But this also showed how much importance Miao Jingyun placed on Xiao Miao originally. With June Dashao's personality, he would definitely not give in after hearing Miao Jingyun's arrogant words. He would definitely make things clear with this old fellow before proceeding with the next step. What, you think you're so great? To actually dare to shout at this young master like this? This young master is the benefactor of your entire Miao family, and you dare to act so arrogantly when asking this young master to save someone? If this young master is willing to help, then it's a favor. If I'm not willing, then it's my duty. Who do you think you are? But the current situation was really special. It seemed like Xiao Miao's life was on the line, and June Moxie really did not have the mood, energy, or the time to bicker with Miao Jingyun. Without another word, he followed behind Madame Miao. Madame Miao brought June Moxie and Miao Huanyu with her. The three of them walked into the elegant building. Below, Miao Dao asked in confusion, Manorhead, why didn't you explain the problem of the bi-marriage today? We might as well take advantage of this momentum and take down this brat in one go. Wouldn't that solve the problem once and for all? Although the two brothers were a generation higher than Miao Jingyun in terms of seniority, they did not dare to be careless in addressing him, nor did they have the slightest bit of arrogance. This was the authority of the manor lord of the Misty Mansion. Bullsh * Kiora. Miao Jingyun scoffed angrily. It's still unknown whether Xiao Miao will wake up or not. If we decide on a marriage now, isn't it too early? Besides, it's our Miao family marrying off a daughter. Don't tell me we have to beg others to marry her. If he wants to marry Xiao Miao, how can we display the preciousness of our Miao family's daughters without going through some trials and tribulations? Wouldn't that be letting him off easy? But, Manor Lord, from what that last said, it's clear that today's matter was because that brat rejected Xiao Miao. That's why Xiao Miao is like this? Speaking of Miao Xiao Miao, Miao Jian's face was filled with pity. But the meaning behind his words was, that brat had already rejected her, so how could he possibly beg to marry that last Xiao Miao? Today's rejection doesn't mean that he will reject her again in the future. Miao Jingyun smiled slyly. Didn't you see? When I mentioned Xiao Miao's current situation, that brat was so nervous that he was about to die. If he says that he doesn't care at all, even a ghost would not believe it. I even suspect that this brat is just trying to raise his own status. As he spoke till here, he felt that his words were a little lacking in bearing as the Manor Lord of the Misty Mansion. He coughed lightly and said, but if Xiao Miao really doesn't wake up, then there's no need to mention this matter anymore. And this old man will definitely make that brat pay the price. So what if he has the free and natural physique? He glared at them and added heavily. The price of his life. Everyone was silent for a while. They raised their heads and looked at the quiet building, hoping that there would be some good news that would make them happy. Everyone's heart was heavy. For something like this to happen right before the Manor Lord's birthday banquet, it was truly as if someone had poured a ladle of cold water over them in the midst of their joy. If Miao Xiao Miao really did not wake up, then what would happen to the birthday banquet tomorrow? Everyone had no confidence at all. What entered their eyes was a quiet young lady's room. The room was very clean, and there was a dreamy white veil hanging on the window. There was a small and exquisite bed, and at the head of the bed, there was a lily that was about to bloom. On the pure white wall, there were 2 pieces of calligraphy. One of them was, obeying the heavens may not exist, defying the heavens should be laughed. Who is like me, pointing my sword at the waves of the world? The sun and moon are in my bosom, watch me dominate the world. The green sword is casually unsheathed, who dares to walk the clouds with me? A sword with lofty sentiments throughout the ages, a rain of blood and foul wind, no one falls. A sword to conquer the central plains, standing tall and asking, never bowing in this life. Who is dancing in the clouds, let me gaze through the horizon, my heart broken, the wind and snow howling in my heart. The song ends and people scatter, a sword in anger pierces the 9 heavens. Since ancient times I laugh together, the world is free and unfettered, those of the future do not compare with me. The inscription was, written by Mo Junyi, copied by Xiao Miao. The other one was, the flowers in the forest have withered and turned red in the spring, too hurried, helpless, the cold rain in the morning and the wind in the evening, rouge tears, leaving people drunk, when will it be heavy, people grow old, the water flows east. The inscription was also, written by Mo Junyi, copied by Xiao Miao. In front of the window, there was a small table and on it, there was a 7-stringed jade zither. On the side, there was the score of the Song of the Burial of Flowers. Just by looking at this, it was as if he could see Miao Xiao Miao's heart. Because, apart from this, there was actually no other decoration in this young lady's room. As the only pearl of the Miao family of the Misty Mansion, the granddaughter of the Misty Mansion's mansion master, her room was actually decorated so simply. This was really out of Jun Moxie's expectation. But when he thought of Miao Xiao Miao's gentle personality, he thought to himself, this was more in line with Miao Xiao Miao's personality. And the owner of this room, Miao Xiao Miao, was lying quietly on the bed, her face was exceptionally pale, and she was not moving at all. Even the rise and fall of her breathing was indistinct. Even though she was unconscious, that pair of beautiful eyebrows were actually wrinkled miserably. There seemed to be a glistening teardrop at the corner of her eyes. Just as Jun Moxie stepped into the door, he saw Miao Xiao Miao's expression, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. Not long ago, this woman in her prime was still speaking to me in a gentle and soft voice, trying to soothe me with her tender feelings, hoping to melt the layers of ice in my heart. But at this moment, she has already become so miserable and on the verge of death. And all this is because of me. It's all because she loves me too deeply. Humans are not plants, they are all emotionless. At this moment, June Moxie had an indescribable feeling in his heart. Even though he had always been a calm person, he couldn't help but feel a little excited at this moment. In an instant, he felt a little lost in his heart. If I could turn back time and do it all over again, would I still say those words to her? June Moxie smiled bitterly. For the first time, the way he looked at Miao Xiao Miao was filled with tenderness and pity. After all, he wasn't a cold-hearted person who didn't care about anything. As soon as he entered the room, little Beansprout, who was serving by the bed, noticed him. She raised her teary eyes and said angrily, "What are you doing here, you lecher? Haven't you harmed the young miss enough?" The little girl pouted and glared at him, looking as if she wanted to pounce on him and bite him. "Little Beansprout, don't be rude." Madame Miao shouted in a low voice and said, "Young Master Mo is here to treat Xiao Miao's illness." As she said this, she couldn't help but think that Xiao Miao's illness was caused by this young man in front of her. She couldn't help but stop talking. If it wasn't for his fickleness, how would the young miss have this strange illness? Little Beansprout mumbled and stopped talking reluctantly. June Moxie didn't pay attention to her and gently moved to the side of the bed. He stretched out his right hand and placed it on Miao Xiao Miao's delicate wrist. After using his spiritual power to check, he immediately understood. This was the same illness that his mother had back then. Back then, although his mother, Dongfang Wenxin, was heartbroken and had fallen into a deep sleep, she still had 3 sons to worry about, so her heart meridian wasn't completely blocked. Thus, when June Moxie used his identity as her son to wake up his mother, it didn't take much effort. But now, Miao Xiao Miao's heart meridian was completely blocked. There was no gap at all. The door to her heart was completely closed. What should he do? June Moxie's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. If even he was helpless, then there was probably no one else in the world who could save her. Madame Miao saw that his expression suddenly became very ugly and couldn't help but be alarmed. She asked with a trembling voice, Young Master Mo, how is Xiao Miao's condition?" She knew that this Mo Junyi in front of her was not a doctor, and that even the most skilled doctor would be helpless against Miao Xiao Miao's illness. But she still asked this question, and when she spoke, her voice was trembling as if she was about to cry. This was a normal reaction of a mother. "I need a quiet environment." June Moxie said in a low voice, "It's best for all of you to go out first. And I might need little Beansprout's help later, so let her wait at the door." But Miao Huanyu made a prompt decision and stood up. He held his wife's hand and gave her a look. "I'll have to trouble young Master Mo with my daughter's illness." Chapter 10:13. Miao Huanyu forcefully pulled his wife's hand, ignoring Madame Miao's constant glances as they went downstairs. Although little Beansprout was indignant, she obediently retreated, closing the door tightly. She stood at the door, her ears perked up, afraid that she wouldn't be able to hear the call from inside. She also knew that young Mrs. current situation wasn't good, and this scoundrel young Master Mo might be young Mrs. last chance of survival. June Moxie let out a long sigh, spreading his hands, his right hand lightly pressing on Miao Xiao Miao's heart. Wherever his hand touched, he felt an indescribable softness, full of elasticity. 2 towering peaks, like jade and fat, tightly pressed against his palm. It was as if his soul was being eroded, almost causing June Moxie's entire body to tremble. Although he knew that he shouldn't, June Dashao still felt that there was a certain part of him that he couldn't control. He took a few deep breaths, silently chanting the clear heart incantation. After repeating it a few times, he was barely able to suppress the fiery heat in his heart. Looking at Miao Xiao Miao, June Moxie smiled bitterly in his heart. "No matter what, I've taken advantage of you. From today onwards, I'm afraid things will really become complicated. This matter doesn't seem to be something that can be resolved in a short period of time." With a slight movement of his divine sense, he had already connected to the mysterious tree of life within the Hongjun Pagoda's space in his sea of consciousness. Using his own body as a bridge, he guided his spiritual energy, and a little bit of the power of wood began to rapidly flow through his meridians. On top of that mysterious little tree, A small portion of the flickering green brilliance deviated from its original free-falling path, flowing along his meridians. Finally, through June Moxie's right hand that was placed on Meow Xiao Meow's soft breasts, it gushed out from his palm, pouring into Meow Xiao Meow's heart. The green light that was filled with the radiance of life flashed faintly and seeped into Meow Xiao Meow's body. Meow Xiao Meow's injuries caused by the heartache were recovering at an astonishing speed that was visible to the naked eye. His 5 internal organs were damaged, his heart meridian was severely damaged, and his primordial spirit was scattered. These fatal injuries could be healed by this strange tree, but the final double coma was the most troublesome. The tree of life could only ensure that Meow Xiao Meow had a strong vitality. It could even ensure that her body was stronger than before she fainted, but it could not wake her up. If he wanted to wake up Meow Xiao Meow, he had to use a special summoning method. If he really used it, I'm afraid that the entanglement between me and Meow Xiao Meow for the rest of my life would be inextricable. But the current June Moxie had already made up his mind. Even if the sky falls and the earth shatters, let it be. One step at a time. Right now, he really couldn't care so much anymore. June Moxie was completely focused on healing Meow Xiao Meow, and did not notice that when he was secretly activating the Tree of Life to heal Meow Xiao Meow's injuries, although it was only through the meridians, and there was no way anyone would notice, there was still an extremely obscure spiritual energy ripple beneath the Meow residence. At the same time, a soft voice rang out in the ears of the Misty Mansion Manor Lord Miao Jingyun. What happened above? The voice was not loud, but it was extremely strict. Miao Jingyun's face changed greatly, and he hurriedly used the secret transmission method to explain everything that had happened above. After he finished, the voice fell silent for a long time before continuing. When the treatment is over, bring that person to see me. Remember, you must bring that person to see me. Miao Jingyun hurriedly acknowledged. After a long time, that voice did not ring out again. But Miao Jingyun's face was already covered in a layer of cold sweat. After a long time, June Moxie finally stopped. Looking at the person lying on the bed, Meow Xiao Meow's face had already regained some color, and her breathing had also stabilized. June Moxie was just about to call Little Beansprout in when he saw Meow Xiao Meow suddenly furrowing her brows in pain, and 2 drops of tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Could she have woken up just like that? If she had woken up just like that, that would naturally be great. Perhaps there would be no need for all the procedures. June Moxie was overjoyed, and he hurriedly went forward. But he only heard Meow Xiao Meow's pitiful pleading voice. June, could it be that you really don't want me anymore? June Moxie's heart shook, and he stared blankly at the beautiful face in front of him. His heart was in a complete mess. June, you have a wife, who? Then I'll be your concubine, is that all right? I only beg that you don't abandon me. Really don't want to become a tool? In the unconscious state, Meow Xiao Meow begged pitifully. Her brows were furrowed, and tears flowed down her cheeks continuously. She had been struggling in the depths of her heart for a long time, but she didn't dare to say it. Facing such deep emotions, even if one's heart was made of stone, who could really remain unmoved? June Moxie finally could not hold it in any longer. He gently held Meow Xiao Meow's petite hands and pressed them against his face. As long as you wake up, I want you, for a lifetime. In this instant, all the worries in June Moxie's heart disappeared. Fuck it. Is there really anything in this world that I, June Moxie, cannot settle? Isn't it just a misty mansion? As long as you don't regret it, I will snatch you back even if I have to snatch the bride. I want to see who dares to make you suffer. Having made up his mind, June Moxie immediately regained his usual decisiveness. He raised his head and shouted, "Little Beansprout, come in." With a squeaking sound, Little Beansprout ran in as fast as she could. Close the door. Little Beansprout hurriedly replied and closed the door carefully. Then she tiptoed over to the bed. Seeing that Meow Xiao Meow's face had actually regained its rosy color, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. Is young miss all right? Just a little bit more, I'll need your help next, cough cough. June Moxie carefully considered his words, but still felt that it was difficult to say it. He awkwardly coughed a few times, but still couldn't say it. What help? Hurry up and say it. Little Beansprout was obviously an impatient person. Seeing that Jun Dashao was in a difficult position, she became anxious instead. As long as young miss can wake up, I'll do anything you want me to do. Hurry up and say it. It's like this. Jun Moxie lowered his voice and moved closer to Little Beansprout's ear, saying a few words. What? Little Beansprout's pretty eyes widened as she stared blankly at Jun Moxie. Suddenly, her pretty face turned red, and she angrily said, "Lecture. You lecture. You must remember, there mustn't be any mistakes." Jun Moxie's face was also a little hot, but he forced a straight face and said, "Also, don't make a fuss and don't alarm her, don't. This is the key to waking her up. But if you do that, isn't that the same as ruining my young miss's innocence? How will my young miss get married in the future? You already have a wife." Little Beansprout rebuked him with a red face. "Nonsense. Who is she going to marry? Isn't she going to marry me?" Jun Moxie glared at her and said, "A man has 3 wives and 4 concubines, what's the big deal? Don't forget, you're going to be my servant girl in the future, what's there to be shy about? This young master's that it's only right and proper." At the start, Jun Dashao was still a little stuttering, but the more he spoke, the smoother he became, and in the end he actually seemed to be in the right. For this kind of matter, once the most difficult sentence was said, the rest would be easy to say. Little Beansprout didn't expect someone's skin to be so thick, to be able to say such a thing out loud, and her face instantly turned even redder. Then she thought of what he said, "You're going to be my servant girl in the future." She couldn't help but feel her heart palpitate, and her body almost went soft, not moving at all. What this? What time is it now? Hurry up and get ready. The earlier we do it, the earlier Xiao Miao can get better. Little Beansprout's face turned as red as an apple in autumn, and it was the red Fuji kind. She gritted her teeth and stared at her embroidered shoes, and slightly nodded to express her agreement, but even her neck turned red. "Good. Begin." Jun Moxie took a deep breath and said. Little Beansprout glared at him, and slowly walked to Miao Xiao Miao's bed. She put her small mouth next to her ear, and softly said, "Young miss, young master Mo Junyi has come to the Miao family to ask for your hand in marriage. Do you agree or not?" After saying it 3 times, Miao Xiao Miao's body seemed to move a little, but she still didn't show any signs of waking up. Jun Moxie sighed, and it seemed like he had to use that last move. He gave Little Beansprout a warning look, and slowly bent down. Little Beansprout seemed to have received a shock, and forgot to continue calling out. She slightly opened her small mouth, and blankly looked at this lecher. This smelly scoundrel. He actually gently kissed her young Mrs. Flower-like cherry lips. Moreover, once he kissed her, he didn't stop. He kissed her affectionately, and even used his tongue to push her away. It was really too embarrassing. It seemed that Jun Dashao didn't feel good either. Under such stimulation, the fire in his heart that had been suppressed by the clear heart incantation was instantly ignited again, and that little Mo Xia also came to join in the fun. This last step, or before Miao Xiao Miao woke up, seemed to be a bit too much for him. He forcefully endured the ecstatic pleasure coming from his lips, and with great effort, he opened his eyes and glared at Little Beansprout. "Why aren't you continuing?" Little Beansprout gritted her teeth, and her whole body slightly trembled. Her face was as red as blood, and she continued to call out softly, "Young miss, young master Emojuni, has come to ask for your hand in marriage. Tonight is your wedding night." "Young miss," Jun Moxie sighed, and his right hand suddenly reached into Miao Xiao Miao's clothes. The method that Jun Moxie thought of was very simple. Now, Miao Xiao Miao's bodily functions had completely returned to normal, but the door of her heart was tightly shut. The only way was to use the thing that she most longed for to wake her up from the dream of her heart, and Miao Xiao Miao fainted because of the setback in her love. Then, what she most longed for was nothing more than a perfect ending for her love. Speaking of the way to wake her up, it was nothing more than fulfilling her dream, which was love. Chapter 10:14. After thinking for a while, he really couldn't think of a solution. Just as he was thinking of a solution, he heard little Beansprout ask curiously, "Young Master Mo, what is a professional exclusive to the palace?" The little lass was still curious about that sentence. Now that the young miss had woken up, it seemed that the two of them had reconciled. Little Beansprout's complexion looked much better. It seemed that the young miss was going to marry young Master Mo. "I also have to be his maid. A professional exclusive to the palace is naturally someone who serves the Empress and the Emperor." June Moxie laughed it off. In his heart he thought, how do I go down? How do I block it? This question he casually answered, compared to normal people, those people are lacking something. What is it that's lacking? Little Beansprout stared at him with her big round and curious eyes. She persevered and asked to the end. "Little Beansprout," Meow Xiao Meow called out shyly. She was naturally more knowledgeable than Little Beansprout. Seeing that the two of them actually started to discuss this deep question, she hurriedly stopped them. "Ahem. I should go down." June Moxie coughed twice and said awkwardly, "But my pants." It was fine if he didn't say it. Once he said it, the two girls immediately covered their mouths and laughed until their faces turned red. Two pairs of beautiful big eyes were squinted into crescent moons. Their shoulders kept trembling and their eyes seemed to be specially looking at a certain part. "What are you laughing at?" Young Master June rolled his eyes and looked around. Suddenly, he walked to the window and pulled down a piece of the curtain. Then he tied it around his waist with his right hand and tucked the bottom of his robe tightly inside and pulled it tight. If he tightened it like this, he probably wouldn't be able to see the bottom. June Moxie heaved a sigh of relief and lifted his feet to walk downstairs. Just as he reached the door, he heard a shy voice behind him. "June?" "What?" said. "Is it true?" June Emosia paused. Then he nodded and said, "It's true." He had said these three words in a resolute and decisive manner. There wasn't any hesitation in his voice. Behind him, an uncontrollable whimper of ecstasy could be heard. He could only hear Meow Xiao Meow whimpering softly, "I also don't want June to make things difficult for me. I only hope that you don't forget me." June Emosia felt an indescribable warmth in his heart. He took a deep breath and almost couldn't help but turn around and hug this lovable woman tightly. But he managed to control his impulse and nodded his head. Then he pushed the door open and walked out. Behind him, Meow Xiao Meow looked at his back with tears in her eyes. Her smile was full of joy and satisfaction, as well as a strong sense of happiness. All these emotions mixed together made Meow Xiao Meow look like a dewy rose at this moment, exceptionally beautiful. But when she looked at the skin on the back of June Moxie's neck, she suddenly thought of a very strange thing. The skin color of his face, arms, neck, and other parts of his body aren't white at all. It can even be said to be a little dark, but why is the skin on his thighs so white and tender? It's so beautiful. As she thought about it, Meow Xiao Meow's face suddenly turned red, but there was still a wave of doubt in her heart. However, she immediately shook her head and threw this question to the back of her mind. That place seemed too awkward. Right now, it was already the best time for her to obtain happiness, so it was better not to think about those unconventional things. Almost as soon as June Moxie walked out, two figures came rushing towards him, almost colliding with Da Xiao. The people who came were Meow Xiao Meow's parents, Meow Huanyu and Madame Meow. Madame Meow glanced at him with a complicated look in her eyes before rushing past him into the room. Meow Huanyu smiled and looked at the young man in front of him. He reached out and patted his shoulder, saying gently, "It's been hard on you. It's my duty. How could I dare to accept Uncle's hard work?" June Moxie smiled awkwardly. Not bad," Meow Huanyu said. Meow Huanyu said. Then he sighed deeply and said seriously, "Treat my daughter well." After saying that, he did not wait for June Moxie's reply and walked into the room. "I will." June Moxie did not turn back. He only replied silently in his heart. Madame Meow's joyful voice rang out from behind the door, as well as the sound of whispers. June Emosia smiled faintly and slowly walked down the stairs. Only now did he feel that his crotch was swaying leisurely, and there was a breeze blowing from both his front and back. It was actually quite refreshing. In the Great Hall, most of the people who had gathered here had already dispersed. Only Miao Jingyun, Miao Dao, Miao Jian, and a few others were still waiting. They were currently brewing a pot of good tea, and everyone was sitting with their eyes closed, sipping it carefully, as if they were enjoying it very much. There was not a single trace of the hostility from earlier, as if they wanted to skin Jun Moxie alive. Finally willing to come down? Miao Jingyun snorted and raised his eyelids. His granddaughter was already fine, and the current Miao Jingyun had regained the transcendent aura of the owner of the Misty Mansion. His every action and every word was filled with elegance, and there was a faint aura of superiority about him. However, Jun Moxie, who had seen the true face of this old hoodlum, would never believe this anymore. Hearing that, he smiled lightly and said, "Of course. But it's a pity that tomorrow's birthday banquet will be lacking this dish of mine. Just those few pieces of smelly meat on your body. Do you really think this old man is very interested in them?" Miao Jingyun snorted coldly and said, "Sit." Jun Moxie didn't stand on ceremony. He walked over and pulled a chair. Then he sat down on it. He felt a faint pain in his crotch. So, he instinctively spread his legs wide as he sat down. He was afraid that he would bump into something and increase the pain. But he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly pressed his legs together again. Yawning loudly, he picked up a cup of tea and was about to soothe his parched throat. All of a sudden, Miao Jingyun's eyes widened, and that superior aura of superiority instantly disappeared. At the same time, his throat gurgled like a chicken being slaughtered, and he spat out a mouthful of hot tea. Not a single drop was wasted, and all of it was sprayed onto Jun Dushao's body. Jun Moxie let out a strange cry, but before he could ask anything, Miao Jingyun had already grabbed onto his clothes fiercely. "Brat, what did you do up there? Hurry up and tell this daddy the truth." His tone was actually very dangerous. "What did I do? Could it be that you still can't hear me?" Jun Moxie pushed his hand away exasperatedly. "I was almost castrated by that precious granddaughter of yours. What else do you want?" Miao Jingyun snorted coldly and let go of his hand. Suddenly, he squinted his eyes and laughed loudly. Miao Dao and Miao Jian were sitting at the side, so they did not see Jun Dushao's exposed body, and did not know what the manor lord was laughing about. They looked at Miao Jingyun in a daze and exchanged a look. "What's going on?" Miao Jingyun laughed loudly and patted Jun Moxie's shoulder. "Good fellow, a really good fellow. My horizons have really been broadened today." Although Jun Moxie knew what this old thing had seen, he could not help but feel a little confused. Scratching his head, he asked, "This? Are you talking about me, or it? Is there a need to be so shocked?" Cough, cough, cough. Miao Jingyun had not even swallowed a mouthful of water when he suddenly choked and coughed violently. Pointing a trembling finger at Jun Moxie, he was actually laughing and coughing at the same time, unable to speak. After a long time, he finally spat out a mouthful of phlegm and coughed. "I say, you brat, cough, cough, cough. Can you be a little more shameless? No one will say anything if you walk around outside with your big head on, but you shouldn't even. I've already tried my best to restrain myself." Jun Moxie sighed and finally had the time to drink a mouthful of tea to moisten his throat. He said helplessly, "But this was cut by someone with a sword. In such a short time, where am I going to find clothes? The room above is your granddaughter's room, and it's all filled with female clothes. You can't expect me to change there, right?" All right. We'll discuss this matter again after you come out." "This old man wants to have a good talk with you. Our Miao family's daughter cannot be taken advantage of by you, and be done with her cleanly." Miao Jingyun suddenly waved his hands, as if he had thought of something. His expression suddenly turned serious. "Let's put this matter aside for now. Come with me to a place first. Someone wants to see you." "Someone wants to see me?" Jun Moxie was really surprised this time. With Miao Jingyun's status, there was actually someone who wanted him to pass on an order, and even wanted him to bring him over to pay a visit. Then, who could that person be? Jun Moxie's mind raced, and he immediately thought of something. Could it be, which old ancestor of the Miao family? This guess was definitely not far from the truth. But which generation of Miao family's old ancestor wants to see me? What is it exactly? Come with me. Miao Jingyun stood up abruptly, and Miao Dao and Miao Jian immediately stood behind him. Then you should at least give me a change of clothes first, right? Jun Moxie said. There's no need to change. Miao Jingyun said in an unquestionable tone. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, We're all men here. Just treat it as if we've entered the bathhouse. How much difference can there be? Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What did he say? It seems like I'm the only one who's entered the bathhouse, right? But even if you guys entered the bathhouse, you're still wearing clothes. At least you're not revealing anything. Under Miao Jingyun's urging, the four of them walked out of the hall. On the way, Miao Dao leaned over to Jun Moxie's ear and said viciously, Brat, consider yourself lucky to have escaped from this calamity today. Don't forget that you were disrespectful to this old man earlier. One day, this old man will make you regret it. A few thousand years later, I will definitely find you for a decisive battle and settle today's matter. Jun Moxie looked at him expressionlessly. Miao Dao was instantly enraged. A few thousand years later, with the shocking growth rate of the free and natural physique, it would probably not even take a few thousand years. At that time, it would definitely be an existence that everyone would feel terrified of. As for himself, even if he was lucky enough to be alive at that time, he would probably be old beyond recognition by then. Chapter 10:15. By the side, Miao Jian's usually cold face couldn't help but reveal a smile. This lad was really interesting, to actually make old Dao so depressed. The four of them walked out of the great hall and sped along the way. First, they took a few turns, and then they walked through a series of complicated paths. Only then did Miao Jingyun open the first secret door and enter the underground. After going around for a while more, Miao Jingyun finally arrived at an extremely secretive location and opened a second secret door. After walking around for a long time, he finally opened a third secret door. Then, Miao Jingyun, Miao Dao, and Miao Jian all stopped. The expressions of the three of them became as serious and fanatical as pilgrims on a pilgrimage. Jun Moxie only felt that his head was about to explode from all the twists and turns. Not to mention that he wasn't a spy. Even if he was a real spy, he would probably be driven crazy by the Miao family's complicated paths before he could even reach this place. We'll send you here. Miao Jingyun said. You'll have to walk the rest of the way on your own. His voice was very serious, without the slightest hint of a joke. I'll go in by myself? Jun Moxie jumped in fright. You guys are already making me dizzy by bringing me around like this. If I go in by myself, wouldn't I be lost alive? Don't joke around. The path in the future is a straight path, without any branches. Miao Jingyun said slowly. In these 500 years, apart from the day this old man took over the position of the Misty Mansion Manor Lord, you're the first person to enter. Lad, make good use of this opportunity. Then, the three of them stood at the side, not moving an inch. The fanaticism in Miao Dao and Miao Jian's eyes was like that of a Buddhist who had suddenly seen the Buddha, or a Christian who had suddenly seen Jesus. Their faces were filled with excitement and fanaticism, and those two originally cold faces seemed as though they were about to burst into flames. Jun Moxie hesitated for a moment, then walked in. The moment he walked in, the door suddenly closed tightly. If one looked at it from the outside, it would look like a stone wall. There were no cracks at all. Jun Dashao did not know that when the stone door closed, Miao Jingyun and the rest knelt down together and kowtowed a few times respectfully. Then, they retreated quietly to the next level to wait patiently. Jun Moxie walked along the quiet tunnel, moving forward slowly. Although everything in front of him was dark, there was no one beside him, so he didn't have any misgivings. He focused his energy on his eyes and looked up. The tunnel was as bright as day. He could only feel himself descending further and further. He had no idea how long he had been walking for, but there was still a series of stone steps in front of him that seemed to go on forever. With such a depth, Jun Moxie absolutely believed that if this was the ocean, he would have already reached the bottom of the sea. But this place was still dry, not even the slightest bit of humidity. In fact, the air was especially fresh, without the slightest bit of stuffiness. This caused Jun Moxie to be extremely suspicious. If all this was not an illusion, then how did it happen? Jun Moxie continued walking forward. He didn't know how long he had walked, but he was sure that he had walked for quite a long distance. All of a sudden, Da Xiao felt a very strange feeling. This was a very profound feeling, as if he was walking forward in the direction of a kind of Tao. That was the most profound principle of the heavens and earth. Jun Moxie couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed the mysteries within. The air rippled mysteriously, and an ethereal voice sighed. Not bad. It is indeed powerful. No wonder it could control such a miraculous heavenly treasure. This kind of talent is truly unparalleled in the past and present, a marvel of the ages. For you. Jun Moxie's eyes were still closed, and he did not seem to be surprised by this voice. Puma, that faintly discernible voice was filled with a sigh of the vicissitudes of life. Who exactly am I? Even I don't remember. A long time ago, I seemed to have a name called Miao Qingqing, but I always felt that this wasn't my real name. At the very least, it wasn't my original name. What is going on? What is going on with this world? This person's voice was filled with an indescribable sense of perplexity. It was as if he had pondered this question for thousands of years, or even longer, or even his entire life, but he still couldn't figure it out. Miao Qingqing? Jun Moxie silently muttered this name. He vaguely felt that this name was somewhat familiar, but when he thought about it carefully, he didn't have any impression of it at all. Recently, he had been inquiring through different channels. He had recorded all the top experts that had appeared in the last 3,000 or even 5,000 years. This was because ever since the appearance of the spirit seed, Jun Moxie had realized a problem. Perhaps those ancient legendary experts were not really dead, and had disappeared. Perhaps there were some old fellows who used the spirit seed to reincarnate, and continued to act young in this fucked up world. Ever since he saw Zhan Tianji's holy infant in the Zhan family, Jun Moxie was even more certain of this feeling. In fact, when Chao Guofeng and the rest were chatting, all the experts from the Misty Mansion were basically listed out, especially those legendary geniuses, but he still didn't notice this name among them. Miao Qingqing. That seemed to be the name of a woman. Devastatingly beautiful had always been a term used to describe a woman's peerless beauty, but now, someone actually said that this was his name. And it seemed like the person who said this was a man. A junior brat like you probably doesn't remember this old man's name anymore. The ethereal voice floated in the air. But, the talent you possess truly makes this old man sigh in admiration. It's truly rare. Thank you for your praise. Jun Moxie raised his brows and continued walking forward. He could clearly feel that this voice did not have any ill intentions. In fact, there was even a hint of joy in it. Right, you can continue walking like this while chatting with this old man. You won't be so bored, and I'll also have one more thing to do. This old man who called himself Miao Qingqing seemed to be very happy to have someone to chat with him. But in the next instant, he said with a hint of sadness, "How many years has it been since someone has spoken to me like this? This feeling is truly lonely. Since your surname is also Miao, you must be an elder of the Miao family. Why don't you stay up there and reunite with your family? Even if you're not willing to stay up there, you can still call a few juniors over every few days to entertain you. Isn't that a rather convenient thing? To feel so lonely in your own family, this loneliness of yours is something you brought upon yourself." Jun Moxie said lightly. "Brought upon myself? What do you know?" The voice was still ethereal, and it did not seem to be angered by Jun Moxie's impudent tone. "If this old man can live up there, do you think this old man has a screw loose in his head? Why would I hide in such a dark place? Oh, so there's another reason. I was just wondering." Jun Moxie followed the corridor and turned a corner. A long corridor appeared in front of him. It was still heading downwards. It seemed like Da Xiao had already thought it through. Since he had already walked so far, he might as well continue forward. He wanted to see how long this tunnel was exactly. Thus, he did not say anything and continued walking forward. Let's not talk about that. That old man's voice sounded a little desolate. Where was I just now? This old man had actually forgotten what he was talking about. It seemed like this old ancestor of the Miao family had some dementia. As Jun Moxie walked forward quietly, he replied softly, "Just now you said that my aptitude is not bad and that it caused you to be amazed." When he said this, Jun Moxie did not feel the slightest bit embarrassed. In fact, he was even feeling proud in his heart. So what if I have the so-called free and natural physique? If my true aptitude is revealed, it would be strange if this old man's jaw doesn't drop. Do you really think that those so-called legends are so amazing? Yes, that's exactly what I said. That old man said gratifyingly. Young lad, your memory is not bad, and your character is not bad either. What's even rarer is that you actually possess the cultivation of the 4th level of the Holy Emperor at the age of 20, and your profound energy is extremely pure. Such a genius, even in this old man's entire 10,000 years of life, you are the only one I have seen. Not bad at all. Well, Jun Moxie's body shook, and he finally could not help but stop walking. His eyes also opened for the first time ever since he had closed them, and they shot out 2 extremely sharp rays of light. He had been trying his best to hide his true strength from the start. Furthermore, with the help of the Hongjun Pagoda, a cheating device, and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, a divine technique that had never appeared in this world, this person had actually seen through his true strength. Just how did he see through it? Especially since he did not know how far this person was from him, and he did not know how strong this person was. But just based on his eyesight and knowledge, he definitely had the qualifications to become a terrifying enemy that he had never met in his life. He might even be a great enemy that could threaten his life. Young lad, don't be so nervous. That old voice chuckled. For you to have such a reaction, I believe that you have always been hiding your true strength outside, right? Don't worry, I will not reveal your secret. He paused for a moment before continuing, because I can feel that in your heart, you do not have any enmity towards the Misty Mansion. Since you do not have any enmity, then no matter what you want to do, I will not take the initiative to kill a genius like you who is perhaps the only one in the history of the Shen continent. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.